Okay, then again, good morning, bon matin tout le monde, guten tag, buenos dias, bom dia, and that's all that I could remember. I will try to learn for the next forum more languages, I promise. It is really a pleasure to welcome you all today here in Ottawa in this wonderful venue. We are delighted to have such a diverse group of participants representing such a various and broad expertise, and we are looking forward to have all of your expertise and perspective. The presence and how many people are here in the room is just showing and underscoring how important the collaborative effort we are doing right now is. So thank you very much. You can hear I'm a little bit nervous. I'm not used to talk to so many people. I am originally a marine biologist. You must have received an email from me, so I'm Alexandra Sophie from KDM. Everyone calls me Sophie just for easiness. I am from Quebec, Canada, and I think it's a great show of how Atlantic Ocean is connected. I'm from here, I work in Germany, and now I'm back here welcoming you all. I put you all a little treat from my heart. It's a little maple leaf of maple syrup. It's something I used to eat as a child, so it's vegan. It's only maple syrup and sugar, so no problem there for everyone. Yes, oh yeah, I do have this little thing. Just quickly, the overview of the agenda. So we're just going to have this morning welcoming presentation. I will explain to you a little bit how the workshop is going to work. We are fully hybrid, which means we have participants online, we have moderators online, we have my colleague Jonathan online that is also going to give presentation. We have a keynote speaker online, so we are fully hybrid, and we're very happy that we could manage to do this. So in the first part, we're going to have inspiration. We're going to have panel discussion and discussants that are going to try to inspire you and motivate your thinking into making exchanges. For the later on, we're going to have a health break, very important. And afterwards, we are going to break into groups, and we are going to discuss and talk about the inspiration that the keynotes and the panelists have given us, and also think about coastal resilience altogether. We will have, afterwards, we will come back together. So the breakout groups are the tables you are sitting at the moment. And we will come back, and we are lucky enough to have many early career ocean professionals today with us that are going to support you in your breakout groups and going to bring the key messages in the plenary presentation. We are going to look a little bit at outputs, and then we also have a very nice networking lunch afterwards between the OKEANO Coastal Resilience workshop and the Meopar Living Lab workshop later on. So let's jump right in. I would like to introduce Dr. John Bell, who's going to give us the welcoming statement. John Bell is the Director of Directorate Healthy Planet in the Directorate General for Research and Innovation of the European Commission. His many responsibilities include a 10 billion budget covering such fields as climate change, bioeconomy, food systems, biodiversity, and much more in Horizon Europe. The EU's funding program for research and innovation, and also co-chairing the governing board of the 2 million circular-based Europe Joint Undertaking. And I would like to welcome John to the front. Thank you very much.
Merci, Sophia. So I, too, as a child, used to eat gummy bears like that, but in far too large a quantity, Sophie. And on behalf of everybody here, thank you and the team for a very warm welcome and a very well-organized event, which is not an easy thing to do in life. So relax and enjoy it. So we're here to talk about coastal resilience at this side event. But just to start this, it's very important to get a sense of the moment. Many of you are colleagues and friends, this community that we have that's represented in this room from coast to coast and pole to pole, different scientific background, policy background, very importantly, generational backgrounds, which is what we have to be about here, are seeing a moment where actually our work of the last 2 years has gone from niche to norm. So the oceans and our understanding of the ocean is now informing public policy investment. So the penny, or whatever your currency is starting to drop. And in our task of making peace with nature, this is very important. In Brussels, just to let you know, like many of you, we've had an election, which is a good thing, and we have new people coming in, and we will have for the first time a commissioner for oceans and fisheries. And the task he's been given by President von der Leyen is to develop an ocean pact, which is dealing with all of the issues that have been discussed and raised here, that will deal with things like knowledge amongst generations and people, observation, ecosystems, the ocean climate nexus and so forth. That's his task, as well as the fisheries angle, and also to develop, as part of his political level mission, a strategic research and innovation agenda for the oceans, which is actually, we can say, here's one we prepared for you earlier, Commissioner. So that's positive. On the other hand, those of you who are doing the science will know that we're now living in an age of adaptation, and that means that climate tipping points are no longer in the future tense. So the work we're doing here is actually part of the present as much as it is part of the future. And the importance of the work that we're doing here, the work you're doing, I'm really impressed with how far and how quickly you've moved, will be supported by the actors in the high-level board as one of our flagship initiatives. I was just talking to Imran earlier on. We started this idea in South Africa. The idea was to have an initiative which is owned by the whole Atlantic community, which in our different ways we will participate in. And we'll be talking later today with our colleagues in the US who are leading the one on ocean observation. I was up the mountains in Switzerland a few months ago with a man called Johan Rockström, who's produced another book about the planetary boundaries. And coastal resilience is actually emerging. What he talks about is this safe operating space that humanity has to move across, or this bridge that humanity needs to move across to a safe operating space within the planetary boundaries, and that the bridge is narrowing. But coastal resilience is one of the defining features of that safe operating space. It's a destination that we as a scientific and policy community need to define. And in the work that you're doing, you're defining the pathway. How do we start to think about how we get there, given that it's about real people and places and cultures and societies? And it must be inclusive, it must be led by the people themselves, and it's a really difficult challenge for science and to do that. So we need to innovate, we need to listen, and we need to learn. Resilience, as a word, is a word we're going to hear a lot of in the next couple of years. It's a motor, I think, of human sovereignty in the future, of community sovereignty. It's not just an abstract concept. If we have resilience, we can then have access to the basic rights and services that we take for granted at the moment. It's a foundation of security in the smallest and the largest sense, and I think it's a precondition of community. And many of us can think back in our various, I'm an Irish person in case you hadn't noticed, somebody who can say a short thing in many, many paragraphs and still leave you wondering what he said, which is why I'm in the role I'm in the European Union, I guess. But the idea of community, which is very deep-rooted in our human history, it is something that we really have to work on in this period ahead. And it means different things in different places. But if we don't have resilience, we don't have community. So that's just to let you know something that you knew already, which is the importance of what we're doing here today. And the fact the progress that you're making will have a massive impact around this huge Atlantic community that we're trying to build, where I think coastal resilience will be a vernacular language. When you are running this, now you younger generational people, I'm just looking slightly over your head there, Imran, the younger generational people here, when you're running this process, you started it here and it started this workshop. So thank you, basically, and thanks to OKEANO for doing a fantastic job and our IORIA partners in getting us up and running. And of course, we're building on the scientific seminar that OKEANO organised in June and the online event in September organised with the Air Centre. And we'd like to thank all of our policymakers. I know some of you are at home, some of you may even be up and dressed and fed wherever you are across the world, stakeholders, local communities, and inviting you to listen and speak up in this conversation that we're unfolding. This is a very localised, very differentiated, and must be a very inclusive process. The survey that OKEANO prepared is very important, and now it's openly accessible, providing an opportunity to each of you to feed into this important conversation and your communities in whatever way or language that you have. I mentioned the European Union, this place on the other side of the pond, where we're trying to get research and innovation to be a central part of what we're doing in the transition in the next few years. And of course, like everybody else, we'll have a big budget debate, which everybody will enjoy. But I think we're quite confident that research and innovation will play a very central role in helping the transition to help communities in how are we supposed to move, not what are we supposed to do, but how are we supposed to move forward. We have a thing called the EU mission, Restore Our Ocean and Waters, which you may or may not know. If you are not a charter signatory, sign up. It's a mobilisation, in particular in the Atlantic and Arctic lighthouses. We have 4 lighthouses to convene research innovation communities around these, solving the issues around the restoration of the ecosystems, the addressing of the pollution issues, and the decarbonisation of the blue economy. And you're actively invited to participate there, and we are of course going to ensure that that work and the work we're doing here are working hand in hand. There are of course hugely important connections between our coastal resilience science and solutions between north and south and east and west, and this again has to be a defining feature, like the generational thing about how we think, where we start from, where we get to. We know that we need more applied science for the benefit of coastal communities to make them part of what we call transition agendas, which could be kind of sinister in some languages, but we need to find a way of saying this is how communities remain communities, and what is important to our belonging in our different ways is supported by science in addressing the changes that climate is bringing to us. And therefore no community should be isolated, left behind, or not included. And there are very different kinds of communities which have very different forms of knowledge to bring to this. We need to ensure that we have cities, ports and islands actively involved, which are kind of the structuring members of our ocean community. In our mission, Ocean and Waters, we're establishing a coalition of cities, regions and islands, and we're funding the support from that, where we're hoping to move towards having these 50 regions and cities where we can have active drivers of this change, and we're inviting in our partners around the Atlantic to match that with bringing 50 other communities, islands, ports, cities, who can be part of leading this. Last but not least, there are really important milestones ahead for us and for many of you. Canada's kind of quiet at the moment politically. Isn't that right? There's nothing going on here. Is there anything going on in North America? I don't think so. It's kind of a quiet year politically. I'm being ironic. It's a quiet year, but it's a very important year. So when we all come up for air politically, institutionally, democratically next year, it's important that we have things to show and tell, that we can show when the Canadian leadership of the AORIA has been fantastic, and the European Union will take it on next year. We will have an event of AORIA and the high-level board in October next year. That's a really important moment where all of us can show and tell. We would like to have a political level opening to that, so we can show to the people to whom we work and are accountable that this is something really impressive and realistic. Our mission, Ocean and Waters, will have a gathering, a forum at the beginning of March, and of course in Nice, en France, en juin 1925, il y aura en fait une conférence française. There will be not an Irish conference. There will be a conference where I think some of the critical issues, for example, there will be a dedicated event on sea level rise and a coalition of cities for coastal resilience on the 7th of June 2025. So we really need to get our act together and make sure that wherever you're going, where we're going, we're supporting each other, we're getting out and getting the message out that there is hope, that we've got this, and that between the generations and the communities of scientists and that we are going to build resilience and coastal resilience around this great ocean which defines us and in which most of our futures are tied up. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're just going to go a little bit over what is the context and what is the goal of today's workshop. So AORIA has two areas of action. We are concentrating on the first area of action here on coastal resilience. And I will read now the long name for the area of action because I cannot learn this by heart. So the area of action 1 for AORIA is to increase our understanding of the relationship between the ocean and climate, and developing outcome-oriented science for mitigating and adapting to the consequences of climate change, particularly for the benefit of increasing resilience of coastal communities. And I think what is important to note here is the outcome-oriented part of this message. So OKEANO is us, we are organizing, but what is our mandate? So our mandate is to support the members of the Atlantic Alliance by bringing together the best that science has to offer with coastal communities. And our task today is hopefully to answer the following question. So what could the Atlantic Alliance most usefully do to promote cooperation between science and communities on coastal resilience issues all around the Atlantic Ocean in the short and in the medium term? A little bit of housekeeping. We are going to have the chance today to get an introduction by Jonathan, who is online, our hub that we have been working on the past few months. So our hub, or the hub, is an online space to collect and showcase action, knowledge, and cooperations. We are going to follow by inspiration discussion and presentation that I mentioned before. And after the health break, we are going to break into breakout groups. And each of your physical table is your breakout group. And we are going to use an online whiteboard that we're going to present later. And I want to first thank the moderators of this breakout group and also the ECOPs that are going to help take notes and present your keynote message afterwards as rapporteur. Yeah, and we're gonna set output and next steps, as I said. Oh, yes, and before I forget, you all have microphones on your table, most of you. There's a little button, I think it's a little speaking person, then you just press on it and then a red light will turn on your microphone. That means the microphone is hot, so be careful what you're saying. And then you can press again to switch it off. Same thing for the presenter here, and the only thing I was asked is not to bend the microphone back and forth, just turn the box. It will be useful. And also, the coffee is closed, so all the restrooms are downstairs. So just don't go to the coffee, it's closed right now. And I will move directly to my colleague online, to Jonathan, who is going to give you an overview of the Coastal Resilience Hub. This is the beta version, and I will move to Jonathan right now.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. So yeah, we are excited to introduce you to the Coastal Resilience Knowledge Hub today. And we have prepared a short video for this purpose, which shows you some of the main features of the Knowledge Hub. So if you could play it, that would be great.
I'm just wondering, do I click ever? Okay. Yes.
Yeah, perfect. So first of all, you have the chance to translate this main page in the language of your choice. And you can also translate the subpages using Google Translate. And when you first scroll down, you will see our Coastal Resilience newsfeed, which provides you with relevant updates on issues of coastal resilience from around the Atlantic. For example, today you will see some posts from the intergenerational dialogue yesterday and other news. Then we have our solutions part, our solutions section. You can enter it here, but you can also click on the top to see it in big screen. And there you can see, for example, a case study from Senegal on communities tackling coastal erosion. You can hear from the community members themselves. And when we go further down, you can, for example, see how in Belize, the Belize Mangrove Alliance is restoring and protecting mangrove ecosystems from around the coast. You have a map here where you can see how the mangrove coverage changed over the last years. And one of the other key topics we are looking at is biodiversity loss. We have a case study from the EU when we go further down, where we visualize biodiversity loss, how it looks like, where you can see how the shifting baseline syndrome works, and what our coast looked like a couple of decades ago in comparison to now. But you can also see how the Mako BIOS project in this case is tackling this loss using nature-based solutions. So when we go back to the main page and scroll a bit further down, you will see our Mapping Coastal Resilience section. This section visualizes projects and initiatives happening around the Atlantic. So as before, you can exit it directly on the main page, but you can also click at the top to see it in big. And yeah, like I said, there you will find all the actions already going on around the Atlantic. We can scroll through it. For example, we have the West Coast project, which looks at establishing nature-based solutions all around Europe. You can also explore the map, click on different points. For example, here's the Digital Earth Africa Coastline Service, and you always have a short description of the project down below. So back to the main page, and now even going further down, we have our science section. And when we access it, we have a key feature for the scientific community, which is our All Atlantic Science Publications feed. There you can find the latest research on coastal resilience, allowing you to stay informed and access peer-reviewed publications directly from the hub. So when you find an article that's interesting for you, you can click on it and you go directly to the page of the journal. And last but not least, we have the workshop section, which features material from the previous events, the previous workshops. And when we access the whiteboard here, the mirror board, you will also be able to take a first glimpse at today's breakout session and how the interface is going to look like, but we'll see that later on. And in this part of the hub, you will also see the results from the previous workshops. So to sum up, this was just a quick preview of our hub, and you'll be able to access it anytime. I hope the video doesn't skip as much as it did for me here online, but anyway, you will be able to access it online and explore it yourself. And when we go to the next slide, I just want to take a brief look at some of the key highlights we've already included in the hub. And it's important to note that this is still a work in progress. So we are excited to share the starting point, but we will expand it further in the upcoming months. So one of the pillars is the success story section, where we collect inspiring stories from around the Atlantic that showcase individual solutions for individual communities for our shared challenges that we experience around the Atlantic. Then we have the two news feeds, one on the recent developments on the topic of coastal resilience around the Atlantic, which encompasses newspaper articles as well as social media. And it's a bit more, the scope is a bit broader. And we have the scientific publication news feeds, which really showcases or which helps you to stay up to date about the recent scientific publications on the topic of coastal resilience and better understanding our challenges around the Atlantic. And lastly, we have the mapping of actions, where we try to create a collection of existing projects and initiatives as a shared resource to see if you look for a specific topic, if there are initiatives that already work on it. And we invite you to contribute to the actions as well as to success stories. You can upload your initiatives, the projects you know of, via a survey, which you can find in the mapping section. And we encourage you to submit your stories and are happy to showcase all of these individual experiences of coastal communities and scientists working together. And I think with that, I will hand back to Sophie for the keynote introduction.
Thank you very much. I can just reinforce what Jonathan said. This is preliminary. We are looking forward to your inputs and comments on it. But mostly, what are you doing is, the concrete activities you are doing is what we are looking for. Without waiting much longer, we are going to get inspired now by our keynote speaker. Martin Zimmer will start. I will quickly introduce Martin. He is a professor at the Bremen University and leads the working group of mangrove ecology and the research program area ecosystem co-design at the Leibniz Center for Tropical Marine Research, ZMT. His research focus lies on how the species composition and biotic interaction in coastal vegetated ecosystem drives ecosystem processes under different and changing environmental conditions. and how all of these translate into ecosystem services, such as coastal protection, blue carbon storage. Martin has focused on providing scientific knowledge for decision-making and management of natural-based solutions for climate change mitigation and resilience of tropical coastal socio-ecological system. And just before I give Martin the microphone, I just want to say we're going to keep on time, and I will just wave a green card at you because I don't have a red one when you have 1 minute left. Thank you. Martin, please.
Okay. Thank you, Sophie, for the introduction. Good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here today and be talking to you. What I want to do today is trigger some discussion on how and whether combining two socio-ecological approaches that we are currently developing and implementing at my home institution might contribute to coastal resilience across the Atlantic and maybe worldwide. So ZMT, my home institution, has been building bilateral partnerships all over the world with tropical partners. I mean, that's our mandate. And I just showcase these three examples here in Senegal, northern Brazil, and Colombia, because we are about to develop these bilateral partnerships into collaborative hubs. And I will come back to what that means later during my talk. The rationale behind this idea of collaborative hubs is pretty straightforward, I would say. Besides the regional peculiarities that we see across the world, across the Atlantic Ocean, coasts in Europe, in Africa, and in the Americas face very similar challenges of coastal development coming with pollution, population growth, and also, of course, warming and sea level rise as consequences of climate change. And I would say, and I would hope, that all these coasts and their policies also have very similar aims towards climate change adaptation of their communities, especially the coastal from my perspective, meaning that we want to develop resilient coastal socio-ecological systems. And the approach that we take, and that I very briefly want to introduce to you as an impulse for discussion, are called ecosystem co-design and these collaborative hubs that I had been mentioned before. Let's take a step back before we dive into that. I'm not telling you anything new, but it's not enough to wash our hands before we eat and all is well anymore. These times are over. The whole world, we are facing multiple challenges, to be very euphemistic and call them challenges, currently and certainly going on in the future. And maybe the major challenge of these challenges is that they don't stand alone, but they come together and they interact with each other. Pollution and climate change both threaten biodiversity. And biodiversity might influence or might affect the upcoming spread of pandemics again. And this is just a couple of interactions, and we can think of many more in that case. So it's a very complex situation that we are facing. What can we do about it? A one-stop shop approach to addressing these challenges has been proposed in the realm of nature-based solutions. And nature-based solutions has been defined by IUCN, and I think that's a very valuable definition from their side, as actions, as solutions that address societal challenges by restoring and protecting natural and modified ecosystems. That sounds brilliant. So that's it. We just need to protect and restore our ecosystems and the problem is solved. Well, obviously it's not that simple, as we all know. It's just let nature be nature won't solve the problem. That is not the solution to it, because the environment in which this nature is thriving is changing drastically and rapidly. And natural ecosystems, or even modified ecosystems, cannot naturally keep pace with this change. So there is the very important need of intervention, human intervention. And luckily, the IUCN definition of nature-based solutions also includes the term of sustainably manage these ecosystems. And I think that's a key word, a key term here in that process. But what does it mean and what does it require? When we talk about managing these ecosystems now and in this future with drastic and rapid changes, it means that we need to be able to make projections of how these ecosystems might develop in this changing environment. We need to be able to come up with knowledge-based scenarios. And then we can, and this is what we called the ecosystem traffic light, then we can come up with kind of a categorization of these ecosystems into valuable and delicate, which requires strict protection, valuable and resistant, which would allow, and this is a very important point when it comes to coastal communities, which would allow for sustainable use of these ecosystems and their resources. And there might be some that in the future are of relatively low value, and we might allow for, let's call it, open use. And in these open use areas, we might encounter the situation that nature-based solutions alone are not sufficient anymore to reach the aims of coastal resilience, climate change adaptation. We might have to go for combining technical, engineering, architectural solutions with nature-based solutions. So this green-gray hybrid solutions might be a step towards in the right direction. So for instance, we could develop sponge streets that suck up heavy rainfall and deviate it towards natural or artificial wetlands. We do integrate salt marsh plants and mangroves into aquaculture ponds or seagrasses to combine these ecosystems with the food production. We might think of, instead of building ever higher and higher dikes, to combine these dikes with coastal ecosystems, which are adapting to environmental change, grow vertically, and are much more flexible and dynamic. We might even think of building floating mangrove stands or salt marshes in front of coasts for the sake of coastal protection and biodiversity, where the coasts themselves don't provide suitable habitats anymore. Just some crazy ideas. This is what we call building with nature, and this building with nature has a long history going back a couple of decades, starting with a very anthropocentric perspective of culturing and harvesting, moving down to putting nature first, ecocentric perspective, and from there, bringing back nature with increasing human intervention, moving forward into the current status and maybe into the future towards ecosystem co-design, which again would take an anthropocentric perspective, bringing humans into the center of our actions. So what is ecosystem co-design? I brought you this figure to depict in just a couple words the major difference between ecosystem co-design and classical conventional ecosystem restoration. The latter, ecosystem restoration, focuses on the ecosystem, on its structure, on its biodiversity. We are trying to bring back an ecosystem in a stage that is very similar to what we lost a couple years or maybe decades ago. In contrast to that, ecosystem co-design focuses on humans, on human needs, so on the ecosystem services. Which are the ecosystems that best provide the ecosystem services that are mostly needed by local communities? And I won't go into that graph in any detail at all, so don't be afraid. I just want to focus or to stress here the ecosystem co-design aspect, because we need to include local actors and regional stakeholders on all levels, policymakers, from the very beginning of planning any kind of measure, any kind of project, through the implementation, all the way through the end of monitoring for seeing how successful we were with that. And that's a very important point. And I'm pleading here to use our all-Atlantic collaboration for the implementation of such ecosystem design approaches. How would that look like? We're coming back to this bilateral or map of bilateral relationships that we want to develop into collaborative hubs. And not only collaborative hubs, but also using these hubs as living labs, which means we would work together with the local communities, local scientists. We would develop research projects, joint research projects under local leadership, and we would include local actors, regional stakeholders, regional or national policymakers in developing solutions to our common challenges. So these are long-term innovation hubs in real-life environments. That's kind of the definition of a living lab. And the important point is that we have iterative feedback processes in a collaborative manner, and that's also very important for that. So these These collaborative hubs are then characterized by the development or by making use of local networks to develop bilateral interaction into a network of networks, spanning countries, borders of countries, spanning the Atlantic Ocean. And we will develop through that common and also specific, region-specific solutions to our common and specific challenges. And this is what ecosystem co-design is all about, doing this together, specifically for regions, but also with common goals and common solutions, together with the people in the local communities. And these networks of networks will develop across the Atlantic Oceans, will spread across the ocean and connect different efforts, different communities, different challenges and solutions. And this network of networks, this meta-network, in the end will be a brilliant opportunity for ECOPs, for exchange of ECOPs across countries, across and around the Atlantic Oceans. And with this, I come to an end. I thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to discuss later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You even finished earlier. No, that's good. More time for coffee afterwards. We're just going to move now to our next speaker, Mairead O'Donovan. She studied ecological science at the University College Cork, Ireland, and has a background in marine industry consultancy, project and partnership management, as well as ocean literacy. She currently leads the Coast Predict Program Secretariat, sponsored by Euro-Mediterranean Center on Climate Change in Bologna, Italy.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for inviting me to be here. I'm here in place of my program director, Nadia Pinardi, who sends her apologies that she couldn't be here in person. And I'm going to present the Coast Predict program, which is a UN Ocean Decade program, and one that is attached to GOOS, the Global Ocean Observing System. And I'm going to speak today about our program's ambition to revolutionize integrated observing and prediction of the coastal ocean to support coastal resilience. This would provide information and tools for decision makers and communities so that they can manage risk in the short term and plan mitigation and adaptation in the longer term context of climate and coastal change. So very much tying in with some of what Martin was talking about. And considering the urgency and the scale of problems related to coastal resilience, there are significant challenges for this concept of a predicted coastal ocean. At present, there is no network or framework for best practice. Knowledge and efforts are fragmented, and methodologies are not always standardized. Furthermore, there are large data and technology gaps in the coastal zone generally, and in particular in the Global South. And although some services exist, quite often trust in those solutions can be low. So we're looking at solutions and opportunities for these challenges. I'm going to talk a bit more about that. And I just want to focus on the last point here in relation to what we're talking about today, which is actively involving the users of the information from such a predicting system, so coastal managers and communities, to ensure the solutions we develop are fit for their purpose and deliver meaningful products and services. So Coast Predict has launched the Global Coast Initiative, which is our framework for implementation. And the approach for this is grounded in co-design and co-creation of relocatable solutions for coastal ocean observing and predicting. The co-creation element will be essential to foster both trust and relevance in the solutions that are developed. And we started this last year through a survey. So we opened a call to get an expression of interest for pilot sites. The outcome of the survey is what you see on the map here, and if you go onto our website, you'll find an interactive version and you can read a summary for each site. And based on the responses to the survey, we're initiating the Global Coast Network with 130 pilot sites in over 60 countries and over 225 partner institutions. I want to explain the colouring on the map. So through the survey, we used the Robinson and Brink's categorisation of the global coastal ocean, which outlines over 30 regions according to different oceanographic characteristics. And the different colours here represent different regions, and that's important in terms of our approach to implementation and the concept of relocatable solutions. In the Atlantic, there are around 30 pilot sites around the basin, and then a further 40 to 50 between the North and Baltic Seas and the Mediterranean. And for example, the Caribbean region is one of our initial regions where we are currently focusing fundraising effort. And what's crucial here is that each pilot site represents a collaborative hub, and we plan phased implementation through regional clusters of pilot sites, initially starting in 3 regions so that we can leverage shared oceanographic characteristics and downscaling to help develop solutions for local problems. In the survey that people responded to, we asked them to identify what their 3 priority impact areas were. We gave 9 predefined impact areas that we felt reflected the main critical challenges for coastal zones. And the ones that were most frequently selected were Impact Area 1, which relates to early warning forecasting for extreme events or disaster risk reduction, and Impact Area 2, which is about supporting adaptation to and mitigation of impacts of climate change on coasts, including indicators of sea level and temperature, so the future scenarios. Other impact areas were integrated coastal zone management, erosion, and support for nature-based solutions. Another essential query that we included in our survey was to ask about who people believe the users of the information will be, and if those users have already been engaged. So again, we provided some predefined categories of stakeholder, and we asked them where possible to actually identify key organizations or even individuals, because we want to know that they're actually talking to these people. And the most frequently selected categories or stakeholder here are perhaps not too surprising. The bigger circles, I'm sorry that the text is very small, but the bigger circles include local and regional authorities, national Met and ocean forecasting centres, MPA management agencies, the research community itself, and agencies managing fisheries and marine policies. So those are all, if you like, kind of a first level of stakeholder. They're managing coastal forecasting and resources. And then what's interesting is that as you go down to the medium-sized circles, we begin to touch more on the industries actually operating in the coastal ocean, so port authorities, the tourism industry, mariculture, emergency response, and marine spatial planners. So what will be critical when pilot sites get to the stage of consulting stakeholders is to look really more closely at the most important users of the information and to identify if there are people or groups who should be consulted who might be outside their existing sphere of contact. So this is how we envisage the framework as a whole. At the foundation, we have the Global Coast Network, so that's on the left-hand side at the bottom. This is the network of pilot sites, and then on the right, we have the Coast Predict endorsed projects that will provide the methodologies and innovation. So these both will contribute data, methodologies, and best practices to a cloud platform consisting of regionally shared data lakes and computing space. And we think that the cloud offers tremendous opportunities for shared development of services, and an important aspect of this will be public-private partnership. So these services will be demonstrated and tested initially by partners and stakeholders of the Global Coast Network, and then you see the return arrow signifies the importance of feedback regarding the services to inform iterative improvements. So in terms of implementation, we're discussing with potential partners about the architectural design that would be needed to trial a system of federated coastal clouds. And I mentioned that the pilot site implementation will start initially in 3 regions in the Global South. An important strength of this approach is that we have projects endorsed by the UN Ocean Decade under our programme that have or will develop the methodologies and tools that can be applied at the pilot sites. And I think this is also where there may be real opportunity for synergy and collaboration with the All-Atlantic Alliance. So these include projects that are focusing research on integration of satellite data and AI, on coastal restoration, projects that are developing cost-effective observations, including citizen science. So, for example, one interesting example is the Fishing Vessel Observing Network. It's already working with fishing communities to actively contribute data, and we envisage that this could be expanded to more regions and provide an important source of observations. Also, importantly, there is a project called FLAME dedicated to coastal climate downscaling, which will be essential to provide regionally downscaled projections, so those future scenarios. So these projects will provide the methodologies, will demonstrate systems and services locally, and then ultimately generate relocatable standards and applications. And collaboration and knowledge sharing between the pilot sites will be essential for this. And this leads nicely to this slide about prototype examples. So these were described in relation to priorities identified in the Caribbean. So taking the first example about Impact Area 1, which is about forecasting extremes, there's an existing prototype on the Savannah coast, and through Global Coast we think we can replicate similar components in pilot sites where there is a need for early warning for coastal hazards. Similarly, for Impact Area 2, technologies and methods from the Adriatic provide a prototype that might be adapted for climate downscaling in other regions. And these are just two examples of the kinds of relocatable solutions that will help to enhance the capacity. And I want to introduce my colleague Ivan, who will be talking a bit more about some of the modelling prototypes tomorrow. I want to mention briefly the Decade Collaborative Centre for Coastal Resilience. This is a structure also of the UN Ocean Decade. It's led by the University of Bologna. And the mission of the DCC is really relevant to today's discussion. The focus is on strengthening the connection between science and coastal stakeholders and supporting co-design for coastal resilience. The DCC director, Nadia Pinardi, in fact, recently co-authored a white paper on coastal resilience that was part of the Ocean Decade's Vision 2030 white paper series. It outlines the components of coastal resilience, so I think it would be very relevant to what we're talking about today. And for us in Coast Predict and other affiliated programs working alongside the DCC in line with their strategic objectives will play a crucial role for working with and connecting with coastal communities. So this brings me finally to the question of today's topic, or to the question of today's workshop. And I isolated a few key points with regard to how we're approaching communities. Firstly, it's important to leverage existing relationships and connections, and for us, the pilot sites provide the foundation for this, in that local partners will be the ones leading the implementation and connecting with their existing contacts and partners. Secondly, through working with some private sector partners, we've really begun to think in terms of our product design approach. So consultation must really prioritise listening to people who are affected by an issue and developing a problem statement. So a problem statement is a clearly defined statement of what their challenge is as opposed to what we think it is. And finally, it's essential to provide opportunities for feedback and iteration. And for us, that will be partly enabled through the network and by the cloud. So thanks a lot for listening. There is a QR code here to our website. I'd encourage you to go on and take a look at the pilot site map and the projects and partners attached to our programme, because I think there are many opportunities for synergy with AORIA's network and action areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And you are all respecting the time. You're making my job very easy. So we now move to Godwell. Godwell Namo will be online from South Africa. He is a full professor and XRO chair in climate and sustainability transition at the University of South Africa. Professor Namo is also an expert for the Non-Economic Losses Group under the UN Framework Convention for Climate Change's Warsaw International Mechanism on Loss and Damage. He specializes in the fields of climate changes, disaster risk reduction, coastal resilience, and livelihoods, as well as sustainable development. Now we're going to go online with Godwell.
Thank you. Please can you sharing so that I can share my
Godwell, I think you're muted.
Please can you stop sharing so that I can
Still
share my
muted?
presentation?
Now. Hi, Godwell.
Hi, how are you? Yes, I was saying, please can you stop sharing the screen so that I can share my presentation?
Godwell, I think I will switch your slides. It might be easier. Or what do you... Should you share?
No, it's saying I cannot share because somebody is sharing. So please can you do what? Last presenter can please stop sharing.
I will share your presentation. Can you see the screen? This should...
Sorry. Can I share from my side?
Yeah. Jonathan, can
you
you make...
Stop sharing? Please
Can you make
stop
God well
sharing so that
co-host?
yeah, sure. Can you stop sharing? I can share from my side. Thank you.
It will just take a few seconds for our AV friends to allow you to share your screen.
Yes, please confirm if you can see my presentation now.
1 second. Won't be too long.
Thank you.
It's working. Please, God well, go forward.
Yes, thank you. Afternoon or good morning, whatever time it could be. I just want to thank the organizers for giving me time to share this presentation with you. And I also want to acknowledge the presentations by Mariette and Martin that actually link very well to the presentation I'm sharing now. This work is not taking place in the Atlantic region, but it's taking place in the Indian Ocean rather, but there are a lot of lessons that can be drawn from it. So I'll be presenting on coastal resilience building and enhancement through living labs. And my presentation will look at the introduction and background, understanding coastal resilience. I think that information is coming through already. Living labs framing and conceptualization. And of course, I'll end up with the birth of the Buffalo City Metropolitan Municipality, University of South Africa, net zero wastewater treatment plant or WEX living lab. Now, last time I spoke here during the platform, I spoke around information and data readiness for enhancing community resilience to coastal pressures. And of course, that was a virtual presentation I made on the 5th of September. Today, I'm talking about living coast lab on climate resilience and local mitigation. And of course, the living lab focuses on net zero, near zero emissions and climate resilient wastewater treatment works in the city of, in Buffalo City Municipality of Eastern Cape Province in South Africa. Now, the interesting part is when we went there to the ground, this is actually one of the major issues that was raised as a problem. And I think it doesn't matter whether it's in the Atlantic or in the Indian Ocean or any other region, we have got coastal cities and communities that are constantly faced with the challenge of how to dispose wastewater. Now, UNISA's interest in near zero wastewater treatment plants and this living lab is multifaceted. Number one, UNISA is coordinating and endorsed the United Nations Ocean Decade number 42.5, Restore Our Coast. And also the University of South Africa Vice Principal and Chancellor proclaimed the 10 catalytic niche areas in 2021, among them marine and coastal resilience, energy, 4IR, and digitization, natural sciences, and health studies. And of which then the near zero, net zero wastewater treatment plants fall directly into this. The project also, or the Living Lab, is also trying to harness the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, Sendai Framework, and the Paris Agreement elements. Now, this is quite an interesting thing. As we're conceptualizing this, it was prudent that we understood what coastal resilience is. So in a broader sense, in terms of coastal resilience, there are a number of flags that were raised when we did the analysis through the bibliometric analysis of about 164 documents. So they were issued around storm surges, they were issued around flooding, they were issued around sea level rise, they were issued around coastal erosion, and of course, at the center, they were issued around climate change, they were issued around coastal protection, coastal engineering, shore protection, and coastal communities. So this kind of a grounding then informed where we were going. And we tried to pop up other areas that emerged, for example, sea level rise. Now, a further analysis of about 680 journal articles revealed that when I talk about sea level rise and coastal resilience, we've got things like you need tidal gauges, you're talking about climate change was repeated, you're talking about also flood control, talking about is around aquifers, inundation, saltwater intrusion, is around wetlands, biodiversity. Of course, there was also an interesting issue around coastal erosion. And when you look at coastal erosion, other issues that are coming again being repeated: flooding of coastal zones, coastal engineering, coastal protection, is around mangroves, is around sediment budget, sediment transportation, is around shoreline changes. And of course, there are many others that you could talk about that could be brought into this coastal resilience and living lab project. Now, the last area that we looked at was coastal protection. When we talk about coastal protection, what then are we looking at? We are looking at local participation. We are looking at coastal defense systems, mechanisms. We are looking at coastal infrastructure. Again, the issue about artificial reef and mangroves, seawalls, shoreline protection, they came in. So really, by the end of the day, as we are setting up this lab, then it was necessary then for us to say, when we're framing the living lab, that is going to address coastal resilience and coastal protection, we need then to be addressing some issues that came. And of course, surrounding that will be co-design, participatory approaches, use of case studies, use of Internet of Things, issues around automation, they came in, open innovation, they came in, knowledge management. So there were quite a number of other framings then that we used when we looked at establishing this Buffalo City net zero wastewater treatment plant. So now we went to Buffalo City and spent a week there trying to understand what was coming from the ground. So that included, number one, a group of researchers from about 8 universities. Some of them are there in the picture. And then with this group of researchers, we started by also having our own one-day workshop to understand what coastal resilience, what living labs are like. Then we also had a one-day workshop where we brought other stakeholders, key among them the municipality, that also brought in their own presentations in terms of the areas and the challenges that they were facing. Then, of course, we had a day where we had field visits, visiting wastewater treatment plant, recycling plant, the ports there, and seeing what was happening. So after all this, then it came a good understanding in terms of one of the priority projects which we wanted to do then through this living lab was actually a net zero wastewater treatment plant. And of course, in that net zero wastewater treatment plants, we are going then to apply the living lab framing, where we are looking at the whole of society, whole of community, and also whole of government approach. So this would include then inclusive innovation, co-creation of ideas and research agenda, co-design perspectives, and also co-delivery and co-production. Now, when fully commissioned, the net zero wastewater treatment plant or works living lab will then look at 4 key elements. And we are hoping that finances allowing, we should then be able to start implementing this. The wastewater treatment plant is already there, but then what is lacking is, like in this living lab, we want to have full automation of the selected wastewater treatment plant. We want to have an installation and generation of renewable energy, solar, mini hydro, and biogas. We're also looking at climate risk and vulnerability assessment, leading to climate resilient systems, including baselines for loss and damage. We are also looking at harmonization of scientific, traditional, local, indigenous, and other forms of knowledge and systems of knowing. So really, by the end of the day, this living lab, which is looking at net zero wastewater treatment plant, these are some of the major elements that we are saying when we get the funding, we should then be able to implement this moving forward. So what then is the value of this living lab? The value is that globally and along the coast, the challenge, especially in developing nations, the challenge of maybe substandard effluent discharge or even raw effluent discharge into the oceans is rife. So we are saying then, in terms of maybe restoring our coast and also building coastal resilience in the face of climate change, when we for example, have a full cycle recycling plant, water recycling plant, they need to all assist us in doing that. Actually, that was element number 5 in this slide, which is actually the closing the loop. and recycling the effluent for either industrial use and also domestic use. Then that also addresses matters around climate change adaptation as well, especially in arid and semi-arid regions, and where we are constantly witnessing increasing drought occurrences. So I say that also brings up notions of making our coastal cities smarter and also respond to climate change. And thank you for listening to this short presentation. And I'm hoping that we are going to be engaging moving forward in terms of how maybe some of the elements we are trying to establish are going to be of value to the Atlantic regions and also beyond the Atlantic Ocean and coastal communities. Thank you, and over.
Thank you very much, Godwell. We now move to our last keynote speaker for today, but certainly not the least. Paul Snellgrove is a research professor of ocean sciences and biology at Memorial University of Newfoundland in Canada. He also serves as Associate Scientific Director of the Ocean Frontier Institute and as a Departmental Science Advisor to Fishery and Ocean Canada. He led the synthesis of the renowned International Census of Marine Life program and was a member of its scientific steering committee. His TED Global talk on the census has almost 375,000 views. Let's try to increase that after today's meeting. Paul, please.
Thank you, Sophie, and thank you all for being here. It's great to look out on the audience and see friends that I have typically seen on the other side of the pond. So welcome to Canada. It's great to have you here. I thought today I would actually focus on Canada. We're the host institution for this meeting and some of the activities that go on here. And in particular, I thought I would give an example as a Canadian citizen, and then as a departmental science advisor, and then as an academic scientist who's interested in research. And so in thinking about coastal resilience and the key players involved, one of the key issues is the dependence upon marine resources and, of course, the vulnerability to climate change. And so what you see here is a coastal community in Newfoundland on the left-hand side and a community in northern Labrador on the right-hand side. And these are very different sorts of places in terms of the indigenous communities that reside there versus the larger population that one sees on the island of Newfoundland. And so I wanted to start off with something called the Canadian Extreme Water Level Adaptation Tool. And what you see on the left-hand side there is a map of Canada and locations where one can actually get predictions of what weather is going to look like in the future where you live. Now, if you look at the inset, that's the island of Newfoundland where I live. And in the lower right-hand corner, there's an embayment called Torbay, which is where I live. And I live about 200 meters from the Atlantic Ocean. And so one can go into this tool, which is what I've done here, and asked what is the storm surge going to look like during winter storms in 2040, assuming I'm still around to see them. The good news, and you probably can't read it, is that the storm surge in this particular part of the world will not be too bad. And so one can also look at sea level rise and other variables related to coastal risk and where one lives. So I don't have to sell my house, which is good news. And so the second example I'd like to give to you is something called the Canadian Scientific Advisory Secretariat, or CSAS. So I mentioned that one of my hats is as Departmental Science Advisor to Fisheries and Oceans Canada. This is the department in Canada responsible for oceans and for ocean policy and management. And the primary tool that DFO uses for science advice to policy is the CSAS review. And so I've been working with DFO to try and enhance that process over the last few years to improve the contributions and the relevance to stakeholders. And so this is a formal review process of the science, and it focuses entirely on science and what the science would advise in terms of different ocean activities. It began in the 1970s, it's evolved over time, and it responds to questions that are put out by the department, such as how much snow crab can we catch? Or where should we place our MPAs to be most efficient in terms of the benefits they provide? And so it's really the challenge function to be sure that we give the best possible advice when decisions are made regarding ocean use. And so these meetings typically involve a mixture of external experts and internal experts from DFO, and they often include stakeholders who are interested in the resource. Now, a key point here is it's stakeholders with expertise. This is not about advocacy. If you bring expertise to the table, then there is an opportunity to participate. If you're there to argue that you want a bigger quota because you want more fish, that's not on. We simply don't do that sort of thing. So all of these meeting documents are published online. There are also technical briefings. And in total, this produces about 120 meetings a year and 230 to 300 publications. And these are all on science issues. They're all open science. They're available to anyone who wants to access them. And we're increasingly trying to improve the communication in plain language of the outcomes of these decisions and the basis for them. And so there's a big emphasis right now on open science, and DFO is certainly part of that effort. And so there's a policy on scientific integrity. Open science is a major part of that. And I think internationally, open science is really the wave of the future. Open data, to be able to make everything available to interested groups to understand the decisions that are made. So now I'll move on to some of the activities that I've been involved in as an academic scientist. And these are projects within something called the Ocean Frontier Institute. This is a partnership between Dalhousie University in Halifax, Memorial University in Newfoundland, and also the University of Prince Edward Island. And the interesting aspect of this program is that it blends natural science and social sciences in trying to address societal needs. And it's also interesting in trying to merge together basic science with applied science that is of clear relevance to society. And so I'll tell you a little bit about a project I've been involved in. I co-led something called Ecosystem Indicators for a Changing Ocean. And this project focused on coastal Labrador. This is an area that is primarily resided by indigenous groups, the Inuit of Labrador, and they are very much tied to the ocean environment in terms of their livelihoods and really their whole lives. So the Inuit in Labrador have developed something called Imapivit, which translates to Our Oceans in English. And it's really a program to try and represent the Labrador Inuit within coastal and marine areas and to develop a sustainability program. And so this was the starting point for our project on ecosystem indicators. Now, historically, the way that we as academics have done scientists is that we read some papers, we might make some observations, we generate hypotheses, we pick a study system, dive in, collect data, and then leave again. And we write an academic paper in a journal which other scientists will read. Well, that's not really the way that we're doing things on a go-forward basis, and I have to say that Ocean Frontier Institute has been a real leader in trying to ensure that within Canada this is not the way that we move. And so the main thing here is stakeholder involvement and trying to get stakeholders involved from the very get-go all the way through to the end, and trying to develop products that are of use not only to scientists, but also to those who use the ocean environment. There's a lot of detail on this slide. I don't want to go through it, but the point here is going all the way from identifying what are the key issues for people, and then how can we actually do something and create tools that are accessible to local populations. And so this is a cartoon of a food web in coastal Labrador, and you can see that there are some components that are of direct relevance to Indigenous communities, but also a whole variety of ecosystem components that contribute to the success of those populations, not only of fish and marine mammals, but of course the Indigenous communities themselves. And so the idea is to work with Indigenous communities to co-develop appropriate ecological, economic, and sociological indicators to inform management and sustainable use in these northern coastal ecosystems. And so we started out trying to think about, as scientists, what are useful ecological indicators, and you can see some of them here. I'm not going to go through the details. The social scientists were trying to think about what are the really interesting socioeconomic outcomes and how might we go about measuring those, and that's how we went into this project. And so we started off with a consultation process. We talked to local rights holders about the science that we envisioned, but also what science would be of use to them. And one of the things that we learned was, of course, the importance of fisheries to these communities. And there are two particular species that I'll mention to you today. The first is Greenland cod, which you can see here. And this is largely a subsistence fishery. And the idea here is that we wanted to understand how these fish move, how they utilize different habitats in the coastal zone. And so that upper figure that you see with the two fingers is an acoustic tag, which we surgically implant into fish. And then we put receivers around different areas where these fish might move. And we can track in great detail exactly where these fish occur. And so the idea here is to try and understand their movement, how they respond to different food sources, and how they respond to different environments. And so the findings here is that there is changes in seasonal water temperatures that do influence the movement of these Greenland cod over very coarse spatial scales, and also the bottom habitat plays a role on finer scale use. So for the local residents who are interested in obtaining and eating these fish, this is information that will help them understand, first of all, where these fish occur, but also how ocean warming might influence where these fish may occur in the future. And that, of course, helps to plan for future change. The second example I'll give you is some work by a postdoc Kara Layton, using genetics. And the idea here is Arctic char, which is a really essential and it's a core species in terms of Inuit diet. And the question is, what sort of genetic variability do we see in these populations, and how vulnerable are these populations to climate change? And so based on a series of samples you can see there from coastal Labrador, what Kara found is that most vulnerable populations occur near the south. And so these are the populations that temperature change will affect most strongly. And so what this tells us is that we may see northward range shifts, we may see the loss of some key adaptations, for example, the anadromous populations that move between freshwater and saltwater when we see a warming climate. So the benefit here is that we can identify vulnerable populations, and this can inform management and planning to prepare for future change. And so one of the key outcomes, and we're still working on this aspect of it, is accessible indicators for local communities. Now, some of the tools that we've used as Western scientists include stable isotopes, genetic analyses. These are communities of a few hundred people. They don't have those sorts of tools available to them. And so the question we're asking now is, how can we take our findings and extrapolate that into local observations that residents can make? And so you can see some of the examples we have here. Arctic char flesh color, for example, seems to reflect diet. Fish size and abundance, we have some ideas now on some of the factors that influence that. And then finally, sea ice and cover, the thickness, what that means in terms of circulation issues, why it's changing, and how we can predict the ecosystem will respond to those changes. I'll finish up by a second project that is basically the first project on steroids. We took this a step further, and I will say both of these projects took a real chance, in that the way we normally do science is we write detailed plans of how we're going to do our sample collections, where, when, replicates, all that stuff. But if you're trying to co-develop with local communities, that really does not work, because you don't have the time and the opportunity to do that. So the Sustainable Natsivat Futures Project, and you can see the three co-leads there, Amanda Bates from Victoria, Eric Oliver, from Dalhousie, and Rod Lang from the Nunatsiavut government. And the details of this figure don't really matter for our purposes today, but the point is the emphasis on full co-development, from developing the initial ideas all the way down to collection and delivery of information. And so you can see here that it links very strongly to Inuit priorities and Nunatsiavut-led management of ocean use. And so we can see Indigenous understanding of the environment, so trying to, again, bring together Western science and Indigenous knowledge to create tools that are of use to the local community. Now, one of the things Sophie asked us to do, and I'll finish up on this, is to offer one statement of something that we could do or suggest. And I would say that we can support coastal resilience through openness and engagement with stakeholders and rights holders to understand and address their needs. Thanks for your attention.
Okay, please come back to your seat. We're going to start with the panel. Take your coffee with you. Wrap up your conversation. We're going to have a long break afterwards. I still hear all of you talk. The microphone is so loud, I would not dare to, or at least hear. It's very loud for me. I don't know if you hear me loudly. Okay, I will also walk around and tell you to go sit. Okay, so I'm going to start talking now. So we are going to start with the panel discussion now. So our discussants have greatly agreed to come and give an input of what they do. So the goal of the panel discussion is, of course, to now take your questions that you had when the keynote speaker inspired us. But it's also to hear and showcase what, for example, our panelists here are doing in practice. They are actively connecting science with local initiatives. And this is why I'm very thankful that they agreed to be here today. Somehow, we have 3 islanders, which I think it's even greater because they are very often underrepresented in the Atlantic. And so we are going to I will introduce them. They are going to give a quick introduction about what they do, how they connect science to different initiatives, community initiatives, and afterwards we are going to open the floor and we are going to discuss the inspiration we heard, the inspiration from the panelists. You can ask any question you want. This is really the safe place to now discuss everything that happened in the morning. And what we want to do is we really want to see what tools could help to uptake scientific results to support coastal resilience. So our first discussant today is Marc-Olivier Massé. He specializes in the management of island and coastal environments. He holds degrees in geography from the University of Quebec, du Québec à Rimouski, which is also where I studied, but we didn't meet, and also a business administration from Université Laval. He joined the Survey management team in 2016, and he is originally from the Madeleines Island. They are in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and it's it's the only island I've visited. Oh no, I've been to Cabo Verde too. Now that I'm looking at you, true. So I've been to 2 of the islands next year. It's a great place for holidays. As such, he's a fervent advocate for the ability of remote and isolated regions to play an important role in the economic development of our society and to meet the challenges of the 21st century. So I will invite Marc-Olivier to come now and present. Thank you. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Sophie asked me to put everything in one slide, so I try to do my best to resume it. So the question that Sophie asked me to discuss about with my other Islander panelists, it's what can we take as experience from the project we did and the way that we create CERMIM 20 years ago. So first thing first, 20 years ago, I think the founder didn't know that we will have to traduce the 5 roles that I'm presenting to you today. So the thing to be able to be able to bring the community to the research and the research to have a vision, a long-term vision into your community, and you have to fix the role that you want your organization to have. We are a non-profit organization. We have an affiliation with the Université Québec à Rimouski. So we are working with the community and with the research world, call it like this. So what we are doing, we have the vision to be a hub for research, development, and innovation in the heart of the Gulf of St. Lawrence. We are right into the middle of the Gulf of St. Lawrence, so we are between Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick, and Quebec, but we are in the Quebec provinces. We are a mix, all of tourism are saying we are a mix with Ireland landscape and Hawaii, so it's a good place to be. So into the past 20 years, we built an island hub for R&D and innovation. So we have infrastructure space to have our partner and our community. We work with industrial into our community too, and researcher from mainly in Quebec. We have a research vessel. We decide to run a partnership with a fishing company. So we had a working vessel class on the top of the fishing vessel class. So with a containerized laboratory, we're able to go at sea and to reduce all the costs and be way more cost effective on the way that we will be able to run all our research. We have an industrial research facility on an island like our island and probably the island of my colleague. It's difficult to have industrial research places because it's all the way that you are living into your island, the space, it's always a challenge to find a space. So if you want to do the industrial space, probably you will be in competition when other industry would like to have that space too. So we were able to run it in partnership with all the industry of the island. We have a team and a large network of partnership because on an island and a small organization like we have 15 employees. So it's difficult to, but we don't want to have all the expertise. We want to be on open-minded way to working with other experts everywhere. And we have a field research equipment like ROV and all the thing. So the way that we're seeing it, it's a place, the organization like us between the community and the research is working very well. We are 13,000 people live on the island. And we are fishing community mostly and tourism and services community. And last year we entered into our community a bit less than $4 million in research project into the community. So it's very interesting. Not as much as fishery is, but in research and innovation project for the community like us, we are very proud of it. Is that okay? Yes.
Thank you. So now we will welcome Kathleen. She is a specialist in climate change, biodiversity, and ecosystem services with a focus on fishery management. She has worked on FOA projects and is currently a consultant at COFREPECH, focusing on resilient tourism and blue economy on development of co-management in small-scale fisheries in Cabo Verde.
Good morning. First of all, thank you for being here and for the invitation. And thank you to the people online that is following also with us. So to answer the question, what have we learned from coastal resilience in practice? I brought this picture that if you can see at the picture, the question is already answered by the picture. It is because I'm working in a co-management implementation of small-scale fisheries in Cabo Verde. And so what I see with the community that I'm working on from the different islands is that the local community's voice matters because the people at their community, they are the ones that know best what is going on in their community and with the resource that they are exploiting and exploring every day. And also the scientific knowledge is a key because the scientific knowledge will give us all the knowledge we need to support both the local community and even to create policies to help us to manage our resource and to be able to exploit it in a sustainable manner. And also, the policies must be translated to the local dialect. Because when we confront the local community about policy, most of them, they know what are the policies. But when we question a little deep about the policies, they don't know very well what are these policies are about and why are they implemented. And it's very important that we translate the policies and why we are doing these policies to them, because they are the people that are in the front line. And we know that the small-scale fisheries is a bit tricky now because of climate change and all the consequence of climate change that is happening now in the coastal areas. And the resources are getting smaller and smaller. So it is important that the local communities being supported by the policies and the scientific community as well. And it's more important that they understand really what are going on and what is their role in this position. Thank you.
Thank you. And our last panelist today is Nikia Gooding. She is a specialist in geoinformatics as well as environmental and natural resource management. Currently, she is a research officer in remote sensing at the Institute of Marine Affairs in Trinidad and Tobago. She is also in the group of Earth-Ocean Focal Point for Trinidad and Tobago and for the COSTA Collaborative Program on Oil Spill Tracking for the Americas. Her research foci includes oil spills as well as coastal change detecting and monitoring, mapping and managing of coastal ecosystem, including mangroves and seagrasses, as well as for blue carbon. And now you know why I said next year. That will be my holiday. I will visit.
Hi everyone. So I am going to speak on a number of different projects and the tools. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Right, I cheated a bit. So I have 1 slide, 4 slides. We'll go through it quickly. These are the main tools that we use for increasing coastal resilience in Trinidad and Tobago. So Trinidad and Tobago sits in the south of the Caribbean. Our exclusive economic zone is 15 times more than our land space. We have a massive ocean backyard. And what does that mean? It means that we are poised in a very delicate situation where most of our infrastructure, that includes byways, industrial estates, and densely populated areas are all, for the most part, located within the coastal zone. And this means not only are we particularly vulnerable to any kind of external shock, but we also need to plan for climate change adaptation. So it was mentioned earlier through our keynote speakers, we're at the tipping point where it's not just mitigation, but it's now adaptation. And so mitigation time is running out. We need to adapt. So as mentioned, my background is in GIS. It is in EO. And so I will be on that soapbox of leveraging the use of Earth observations for helping the uptake of science results for communities. So most people are able to digest visuals way better than an Excel sheet, way better than a graph. And so being able to spatially represent that very important data helps to really articulate the benefits of some of the research that you have all been participating in. Through understanding not only things like cost-benefit analysis or return of investments, being able to articulate things like how most ocean-based activities have a high return on investment, sometimes even up to like $1 to $10. Those really get those, not just the person in the communities to care about what you're doing, but it also helps the ones who represent them in local government to care even more. And so being able to inculcate, that stewardship, we heard a lot about stakeholder engagement and stewardship already for the morning, but being able to really engender and cultivate and then maximize, make people really care, this is my ocean backyard, and so I am also responsible for what happens here, not letting development, not saying development is a bad thing, but there are sustainable ways to go about it, not letting some developer come into the space and pollute their environment, but instead being able to have a voice to take a stand against those things, or just for their voice to be heard. That stewardship really comes in that aspect. And then you really want to focus on sustainable livelihoods, right? So we are not saying that fisherfolk cannot fish, but really, how do we empower them to appreciate certain nature-based solutions to be able to extend their own livelihood. So in Trinidad and Tobago, we have a number of different projects. A current one we're working on is called the Marine Project, and it's looking at creating a network of marine resilience through the stakeholders that engage with the coastal zone on their daily basis, whether it's through fisherfolk, dive tour operators, persons who harvest crabs and oysters in the mangroves. It's through helping them to appreciate the ecosystem services that they've been afforded through their livelihoods, not necessarily focusing on the extractive measures, but things like, this is kind of a bit new now, but having apiaries through honey production in mangroves, because that is apparently one of the best types of honey in the world now, is actually winning awards. But even things like oyster farming in a sustainable way, where it's not polluting the same lagoon that they would have been interacting with or their family have been interacting with for decades. And so in engaging in like public participatory GIS and getting that traditional indigenous knowledge from users, you're able to then empower them through that own information that they are sharing with you to sustain their livelihoods, to have long-term and sustained or even self-financing mechanisms post-project life. In Trinidad and Tobago, unfortunately, we've had areas that have been really, really affected by erosion. For example, there's a place called Coral Point in our Southwest Peninsula that was a point and is now a bay. So it's lost hundreds of meters of land over the last 100 years. So it's an area that's always been studied. And you might think, 100 meters is nothing. To us, in my little small island, 100 meters means a lost coconut estate. It means a family has lost their entire livelihood sometimes. And so using Earth observations to help predict not just how our coastlines are going to change with time, but also how is it going to be impacted by storm surge, how is it, because we are in the hurricane belt, how it is going to be impacted by sea level rise, because we are low-lying. These things are quite important to help everyone from every walk of life to understand, to appreciate, and then how do we empower them to hopefully not be displaced. Although we did hear from a speaker earlier, Newfoundland is not affected by storm surge and sea level rise, but we are. So how do we then allow them to keep their property and help future generations to also enjoy things like the coral reefs and the seagrasses? Thank you.
Thank you very much. No, I think I'm too far. Yes, I will just, yeah. Thank you very much for paying attention. And now I will open the floor to have questions and interactions. You can ask questions to the speakers or to our panelists, and we will also throw some questions in the room. So please feel free to raise your hand. I also invite all the participants online to raise your hand to ask a question. As I mentioned before, your microphone at the center of your table has a little button. For the tables at the back, I will come to you with a hand microphone to help you ask your question directly. So thank you very much. And please, who wants to be first? I will just... Yes, Marco, and then Gary and Ivan. Thank you. Try. Is it still blinking red? Okay.
This one works. We can also share it.
Well, you can go if you want. I just want to add something after the presentation of my colleague from another island. I think it's on all the thing that all the presentation we have this morning. I think it's important to take care of the impact on the mental health of the coastal community, of all the data and information that everybody is publishing and telling to all of the coastal community. It's difficult for the community to know, as you were saying, is the same thing at home. We are losing meter and meter on coastal erosion. We're starting 2 years ago to be hit by hurricane coming from the south. So it's very difficult for all the community to figure the way to manage that amount of information and be into the real life of all the data. So it might be interesting to have a communication strategy for all of the coastal community, because sometimes I have 3 kids and sometimes they come back from school and their teacher told them, a lot of things about climate change, but it's not completely true. Sometimes there's missing some part of information, so I have to explain to them that will be okay, but it's not everybody in the community that have that amount of information that I could have or the ability to explain it. So I would like to put that information into the discussion.
Yeah, can I answer that? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I do think as scientists we have a bit of a responsibility if we're working in a community, not just to be doom and gloom and not just to make people anxious about what their future may hold, but to present those solutions, to empower them to have their own solution, to have their ideas heard, so that way you end on a bit of more of a positive note. You know, so it's like, hey, there's still hope. You know, yeah, all the coral reefs are bleaching, but there are some species that are particularly resilient. And so maybe those is where we should, you know, have that effort in restoration. So, you know, maybe it's just how we package it and how we share with each other as well in the community. Yes.
Just to complement, I would like to add that this is why education and awareness campaigns are very important, because we need to be sure that we do this inside of the communities and help people, the communities, to understand really what is going on and what is their role in this changing and what they can do to make things be better. Thank you.
Yeah, and not just to, I don't really need the microphone. And not just to engage them and take their information or take their feedback. People get fatigued by these things, you know, and you don't want to make it worse for a researcher down the line to not be able to engage stakeholders effectively, because they're just tired. They're saying, what is the point of me sitting down in this town hall with you? Nothing comes out of these things. You know, like, how is this actually impacting me? How is this making my life easier? And so we have to be more conscious of that. And how is it fair to them? We're asking them to attend a meeting, you know. What do they stand to get from this? Yeah, we get a paper, okay, and what? You know? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Is it on? Yeah, it's on? Okay, sorry. Thank you very much. Yeah, we actually discuss this. So very often scientists, we publish a paper and then sometimes we forget to put it in perspective for the people that are actually affected by what we published. Ivan, you wanted to come in? Or Gary first? Can you turn on the microphone, please?
My point was very simple. Since Jonathan was online, we forgot to applaud for the launch of the Ocean Coastal Resilience Hub. So let's do that.
I see him smile, so he heard us. Yes, Gary, you have one after Anya.
Oh, yes. Sorry. Pretty much already covered there with the previous discussion that this strategy of communication needs to be it is really important, and we need to be very careful with how we're communicating, because whether it's with various communities or with youth groups or even ECOPs, your messaging can either drive ambition and engagement, or it can drive apathy and disengagement and have a more negative effect on our shared goals. So this is something I'd like to know from the panelists, is how you've tailored different trust-building mechanisms so that you can have the level of engagement, but also reduce any kind of fears and anxieties and disengagement. So by, obviously we're providing a service or providing benefits to their livelihoods, but really creating that messaging so it's known that this is provided for them and it's a benefit to them, So this trust building between science and society, I think, is something we need to be careful of going forward. So, yeah, same topic.
Thank you. It's important to avoid despair of everyone concerned in coastal resilience and climate change. Would someone else want to come in with a question? Oh, yeah, Anya, sorry.
Sorry. Hi, I thought it was really interesting, the whole concept of networks, and I think there's a number of organizations that are thinking about that, how to work with communities to build that knowledge globally, and now in this context around the All-Atlantic area. It just struck me that, I think it was particularly when Martin was talking, that there are parallel universes here. So, for example, in the North American context, much of the systems discussion that he was discussing as being kind of led by or instigated by German work is actually being driven by small startup companies in the private space. So in Canada and the United States, there's hundreds of small companies that are building systems for coastal resilience that they're selling on the open market and that they're developing through the investment of venture capital and also by philanthropic investment. So I think it's really important that we kind of link in with that entire community, because otherwise we're kind of missing an energy and drive, which is primarily, I think, on the western side of the Atlantic in the small scale private sector. But I'd be really interested in what European colleagues see in terms of small startups driving novel technologies to support coastal resilience.
Yes, thank you very much. John, please.
Maybe to respond to, I'm not speaking on behalf of Europe, but to respond to the last question. First of all, they were really extraordinarily inspirational presentations, and I know the trouble people have gone to share that insight with us this morning, so thank you very much. Part of what we need to know, the older generation in this process, is how do we need to structure the ARA to make sure that what you need to get done, including in the Caribbean and different places, can get done. But that's something we can talk about over days. The last question it goes back to what you were saying about trust. I mean, trust is probably the rarest commodity on earth at the moment. One of my other tasks is, at the moment, we're being asked to develop a life sciences strategy for Europe, which you think would be a fairly straightforward thing, and a biotechnology act and a biotechnology strategy. We haven't done a biotechnology initiative since 2002 in the European Union, because there's so much of a reaction by the public to GMOs. This is 20 years ago. And this is not a part of the world where people, don't have the benefits of access to all kinds of education supports and all that. So trust is really, it's a commodity here that has to be treated with huge caution. So the ocean space, just responding to what you were saying about the startups and all that. So how do we find a way of working with people who are in a commercial sphere where a lot of the actors in the commercial sphere are respected and some are not, where there are people who have motives which are not shared by different peoples in different parts of the world. So what one country or region might think is entirely and utterly normal in their value system, for example, in terms of what happens on the ocean seabed, or what we do with microbes or biotechnology, may be completely different to people in another part of the world. And I think the first thing we need is transparency. There should not be, and that also applies to scientific organizations, international organizations. We have to find a way at least of showing everybody what we're all thinking and trying to do, and then checking in with other people in whose space we are operating and saying, well, are we okay with this? It's not just saying we want to do something nice about indigenous knowledge where we're starting to understand the importance of that, but just even in the space where we're seeing the commercialization of nature, we're seeing the commercialization of the ocean space in different ways. There's nothing necessarily good or bad about that. But really, the fact that people are a startup or they're a company or they're a scientist, it doesn't mean that they're good or bad. And I think there's a real governance question in an ocean space which is only starting to become understood as an area of activity for different actors. That's about as roundabout a way as I can put it. But there's a real problem. And we get it wrong once, which is what we learned in the European Union on the communication around GMOs. And then you're done, for a long period of time. So all advice welcome on how you solve that one. Thanks.
Yes. Thank you. It's a very good point. Also, sometimes we forget that words, vocabularies between fields, it's the same word, but it means something completely different. And then you just talk. In German, they say between each other, or next to each other. You just talk about the same word, but in different meanings. Martin, you wanted to intervene?
Yeah, I just also wanted to come back to what Anja just said, and I really like this image of parallel universes, because That's the real problem. If we really want to make sure that what we are talking about, co-design, co-creation, participation, all these extremely important things, that they don't stay lip services, we really have to overcome these parallel universes. But then when it comes to the startups, it's fascinating to see how many people have brilliant ideas, come up with that and make their living out of it. And I'm happy that they do. But that reminds me a bit when it comes to technologies or whatever solutions that are related to coastal resilience, that reminds me a bit of these patents for vaccines. This is something that the people in need cannot afford. So we have vaccinations for whatever disease, but the people in Western Africa cannot afford it. There's no chance for them. And I think this is a problem that we also have to keep in mind when it comes to these startups towards coastal resilience. We have to make sure that their findings, their outputs are accessible for the people who really need them. It's not just about business. It has to be much more and beyond that.
Thank you, Martin. Would the panelists want to add something at this point, or should I go to the next comment?
Okay.
No, what do you think?
Okay. Yeah, just to add to what Martin is saying, unfortunately, we've had the experience with startups sometimes that aren't necessarily based in science. And so, they have this great idea, and we love the impetus of it, and we love the intention, and, it's all well and good, and it can be recognized in its merit and utility. But when it's not based in science, and then it's not accessible, it makes it really hard for the ones that are to be, and then to be taken up, and then it gets back to the problem of trust. So, yeah, it is quite a fine line with these startups, but there's so much potential. So even, Martin had some very interesting images of floating mangrove islands. Even if you think of us using GMOs for the creation of resilient coastal vegetation, to be inland or even on the benthic habitats, to improve things like carbon removal or consolidation of sediments to prevent erosion. Some of these things already exist and they do great, vetiver grass, mangroves, but we can help them along, and unfortunately we have the poor experiences with some of these startups that hinders the trust and the buy-in process, but we also need to help to support those kinds of initiatives. From a small island, unfortunately, sometimes eco-design is just out of reach, but sometimes startups could help present a solution to that even. You wanted to add something?
Thank you. Anna, please.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here and for the inspiring presentations and this discussion. And I would like to go back to communication and to the networks. I'm Anna Lilbo, I'm the scientific coordinator of the Agora project. This is one of the Arctic Atlantic missions projects. And to have these solutions and to replicate these solutions, there is also the language barrier, because if we want to reach the local communities and have them inspired by each other, and it was Kathleen, she mentioned that policy has to be translated to the local communities, and not only the policies, but everything, and to inspire others. In our case, we are going for the gamification pathway, but I would like to hear other possibilities to have this change of knowledge and inspiring each other, not only the lessons learned, but on the good example, but also what did go wrong. We tend not to share what is not successful. And in this, what I really think is really challenging in these missions projects is we are expected to develop and to validate solutions. So we have to showcase what doesn't go. It can work at small scale, but it's not scalable. And the point is about scalability, transferability of these solutions. So we will share everything. And this is the point, how, besides gamification, because it's also about intergenerational knowledge, which was also mentioned. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Tristan, do you want to go first? And then...
No, I think she wanted to.
Okay. Yeah, so thank you. Well, I mean, I kind of see some, so when you were saying like it's about knowledge transfer and stuff, but what I see is that like, I see similarities, so I'm from Europe, but I work in Cape Verde, and I see similarities in the distrust in the political system, I mean, which is like a really precarious situation right now in Europe with the uprising of fascist parties. But as well, this distrust is like something that has developed over time, which we will not get rid of in a couple of weeks, months. This is a process that takes time. I work with local fisheries in Cape Verde, and for me, the biggest task was in the beginning to gain their trust, because you come as a scientist, as a white scientist, to a country which has been heavily like exploited by scientists or by white people. And the first thing, what you have to kind of do is listen to the people, because in the end, I mean, you have your scientific knowledge, but they have a lot of knowledge too, and they have different reasons to want to obtain this knowledge than what we do. Like I, as a scientist, of course, I want to publish, but in first place, what has shifted a bit now is I really want to help with my science the people living there. So I think the most important thing is that we flip it a bit around, that it's not like talking from the top stage down to the bottom. It's rather than listening and doing a bottom-up approach from the people who really need the help. And what we as scientists, what we as politicians, whatever, can do to support the local needs. And this takes time. To gain the trust is a really big issue, and it's not easy. And that is as well something where I think we should lay the focus on, really to redefine how we as people from the outside coming into a country can really help and not just do our thing, kind of. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Just before Blessing comes in, I think that's something Marc-Olivier has done quite nicely on the Magdalenes Island, connecting to the community and listening to them. I don't know if you want to directly address this.
Yeah, I think this is the vision that we have when my predecessor founded CERMEM. It's to find a place where the community will be able to refer to if they want to ask something, build a project. And if you want to work with the community, you have to go where the community is. So not each week, but on a monthly basis, I'm at the local radio to talk about the project that we have. We have a collaboration to work on the mental health for fishermen on the fishery in the context of climate change with the Université Laval in Quebec. So we are on field for them to bring the fishermen at the table and collect all the information, and then we will be able to present it into the association, Fishermen Association and everything. So you have to go where they are. You don't have to wait. They will come to you because they have so many other things to do. So you have to keep that in mind on field.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something. It is in line with what you were explaining. For example, in Cabo Verde now we have some projects running there within the communities. And me too, I'm working in a project, and we adopt a methodology, and we went to the communities. We enter in their community. We meet them on the beach, under the tree, in a school, in a place that they can feel comfortable to talk with us and to share their needs and even to propose solutions. We ask them, what do you want? What do you think we can do to solve this issue? And we see that they feel more open to share what their ideas when they are in their comfort zone. So it is important for us to try to adopt methodology to the community, not to come with this well-developed methodology that sometimes in our mind it works very well, but when we go to the community, it is something that they don't understand, and it creates a barrier, and they cannot join us, and we cannot get what we really want. For example, there is a project that it's about the policies awareness in the fish exploitation. And the people, they asked the communities to be the authors and to do like, how we call this? To do a video. And the authors in the videos are the fishermen, are the child, and the fisherwomen. And they are delivering the words in their local language using the local expressions, and that will have more impact in the community because they will listen when they are hearing something in the local language. When we go there, we do it in, for example, in Portuguese, that is our national language. It has another sense, but when we do it in Criollo, that is our local language, people will listen, and when they see the face of the community, of the people of their community, they will pay more attention on it. And this will make a different sense than have someone or another person doing that. Even when we come with people come from outside to do work there, it is important that we identify someone in the local to do the link, because if we go from outside, we don't know you, we don't know what you want, so we cannot trust you. But when we have someone that we know the face, we used to work with or even to talk, we feel more open and we can share our what we think and our ideas easier. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Blessing,
If I can come in there. If I can come in there.
Sorry, what?
If I can come in.
Godwell, just wait a second. Someone had his hand risen here, and then I will go to you.
Thank you for the panelists. Now, one of the challenges that has been mentioned by especially for small island states, is the challenge of land. And we have heard that they have mentioned that land, for example, there's a lot of different priorities for the land. Now, in terms of options for upscaling nature-based solutions, how supportive is the police on the ground? Or do we have challenges with regards to engagement of the government or authorities to support the upscaling of nature-based solutions, given the different priorities regarding land use? Thank you.
Thank you. I will first go to Godwell online, and then I will come back to you. Thank you. Godwell?
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you for the contribution and intervention that are coming from the discussions now. I just want to maybe bring one critical matter that I think maybe the All Atlantic can benefit from. There's although we're talking a lot around the co-creation and co-designing of our research agenda and engagement, I know many academics, there is an untold or a subtle belief that local communities don't have much to offer. So what I want to say is these local communities, some of them have been there for hundreds of years. And they actually got better knowledge and understanding in terms of the interaction with the sea and the elements than maybe some of us as researchers. So I think part of that portal that Jonathan was talking about, and maybe others that are going to come, it will be quite a good issue maybe to sit a separate line for local and indigenous knowledge systems and how they've been addressing matters around coastal resilience, coastal adaptation, and many other issues that are linked to disaster risk reduction. Then also it will be good also to then fertilize ideas from various local and indigenous communities within the Atlantic, because we might discover that maybe one solution being used in Campo Verde or maybe in TT, it could be of use in South Africa or vice versa. So I think this idea of the network of networks, not in the form of academic researches, but network of networks in the form of indigenous and local knowledge systems is going to be very useful in terms of developing these locally viable and locally understood resilience measures, and also building back or building forward better. Thank you, and over.
Thank you very much. Let's go. Oh, you can.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I just wanted to share a story from the Azores archipelago where I work that goes in line with what we're talking about, which is a fisherman that now works with OKEANO, the research group, not the project. that was saying that first, obviously, we have a problem with elitism in the scientific community and the scientific knowledge. And these people feel it because we have researchers going again and again to a local community. They go there, they make questionnaires, they ask for their opinion, but rarely do you see, in a lot of cases, I cannot say rarely, the project doesn't follow through in showing what came out of that specific questionnaire or those specific questions that they answered, and they lack to see the benefit. This is not me saying, I'm giving the perspective of the person that was talking to me. They lack the perspective of what's the benefit for them out of this. And I think this is a big problem because, as our colleague was saying, I'm sorry I don't remember your name, or I didn't get it. We need to get their trust, and we cannot risk lose their trust because it takes a lot of time to get it back. So we cannot risk to continue doing research projects like this in which we just focus on our part and we forget about what they are getting. And I think that's basically it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Stefan first, then you, we haven't met yet, then Patrizio, and then Marit. Stefan, please. Okay. Well, you can use this one.
Hi, nice to meet you. My name is Ronnie Noonan-Birch. I'm from the Ocean Frontier Institute based in Canada. As I listen to the panelists' work that they do and all the other conversations we had about how to engage with communities, I'm really reminded about how poorly structured our funding is for this type of work. True co-design is an iterative feedback process, yet we get these fundings that say, oh, you have to have it done within 2 years or less. And it doesn't leave that room for that necessary back and forth in order to fully understand what the community needs are. So I love to hear all the stuff that we're saying, but at the same time, it reminds me that we probably need to restructure where our money's coming from. And something that we talk about sometimes in my institute is blended finance models and understanding, can we leverage those industry partners, those startups in a way that actually does benefit our projects, specifically at the co-design level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Patrizio? Oh, just use this one. Now that they are there, I want them to be used.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to echo, the congratulations to all the speakers. Actually, they were very inspiring. One take-home message that I got is, and also out of this discussion, is the importance of the engagement with stakeholders and, across the entire process, from the definition of the problem to the analysis of indicators, let's say, and also to the provision of solutions. And just following up from what we just heard, projects like the one I'm coordinating, for example, they go around and they engage with stakeholders across these steps, try to identify solutions and problems and identify, methods to resolving these problems. And these activities mostly done at the local scale. So it has to be relevant, it has to be local. So going from this local scale to the network of communities and the network on network is a challenge on its own. Not only because of the different culture, maybe, but also maybe the different priorities. We have cases, where priority maybe in some island is the increasing whale watching and tourism. In other case, where the same socio-ecological system, maybe in some cases also the same economy, the priority is oil and gas extraction. So resolving that conflict, is not easy when you want to scale it up. But additional to that, even the solutions that we provide, the level of acceptance of this solution is different, simply because we have to admit that, the solutions we provide, they come with a big uncertainty around, and the way we communicate uncertainties is something that maybe we have to work on, both as a scientist, a social scientist, but also as users of these solutions. So taking decision under these deep uncertainties may be one of the topics that should be addressed to solve some of these issues.
Thank you. Thank you, Patrice. Marie? Is that working?
Oh, this one. Okay. Thanks. Yeah, just picking up on things that other people have said, I think the societal benefit is hugely important. This is what we're trying to focus on with Coast Predict, is not doing science for the sake of science, but rather looking at what we're doing as a product. So these aren't stakeholders, they're our customer, and we want them to want our product. Because at the end of the day, if they don't, then the science that we're doing isn't working for their purpose. And I think there's a big piece in communicating about that, and it's almost a mix of communicating and marketing, because I think they're two different things, you know, so it's being able to communicate the benefit, and as people mentioned, I think the examples from certain areas, if you can show that something is demonstrated and that it's been successful, then it gives you an example to show to other areas and to encourage them uptake of the science there. And then one example I just wanted to give kind of in relation to this was just from our initial kind of phase of stakeholder engagement, which is with the scientists and oceanographic organizations or organizations involved in operational oceanography in the regions where we're going to work. We're putting together proposals for 3 regions in the Global South. And we're introducing the idea, the concept of using the cloud, and that's for data sharing, for knowledge sharing, for shared computing capacity, sharing of models, and then development of the services. And it's sometimes met with a bit of, I guess people are a bit cautious about it. And a lot of these countries don't have existing HPC capacity, so and that takes a lot of money. And when we can say, well, actually, the cloud-based infrastructure is cheaper in the long term than, you know, a lot of small systems, HPC systems in different countries, that begins to help to change the mindset, because they can immediately then understand that there will be an economic benefit in terms of the science that they're doing locally. So I think being able to communicate that in a way that will show them directly that there's an impact is really important. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And we're going to end with your comment. Is it working?
Yeah. So thank you. It's really great to hear all those discussions. And I just wanted to raise 2 points. One is kind of from a consensus from what we have been listening, that for scale up from local to an Atlantic-based scale, there are at least 3 things that came out here. That we need to build trust, and that is really important to the community. So it's nice to hear how the importance about the co-production about all over the time, and the communication. My first point here would be, we are talking a lot about the communication, and communication is always a two-way dialogue, and how much are we open to listen and adapt our projects or missions or ways from what we learn from the communities as well, and not only what the information we want to bring for them. And one other thing that came out is about the diversity. That is, of course, climate resilience will be important throughout, from pole to pole, west to east coasts, but it's not the same for everyone. So how to scale this up in completely different realities. But my real point for reflection for us is, one of the colleagues just mentioned something like this, is thinking about the sustainability of the project. And usually we have projects that are based in our time, the research time and the funding time, and that is not always the time of the communities. And how can we be open to adapt it? And also, when we understand the importance of co-production, and if the co-production demands other stakeholders, but we as researchers, we are paid to be in that project, and their time is not paid. So how can we, that is probably the biggest challenge we have nowadays, because usually we demand their time, but they are doing that voluntarily. Of course, they will gain some knowledge and thing at the end, but such will us to gain. And I think that is one of the biggest challenge. At the end, we say, we just came out with one situation like this with Fisherman's project in Brazil, and at the end we were saying, well, the project is coming to the end. We were sharing the results, and they said, well, and why not continue? And we mentioned, well, the project's come to the end, and they said, well, we have been working with you for 3 years for volunteer. Why can't the researchers continue by volunteering? And so that is really important, and we need to take that in account as well.
Thank you, Ronaldo. And then Marco wanted to add something, and then in order to keep our schedule, we're going to go. You will see that I reduced a bit the break now. It's because we took one before, but I will tell you after they're done and then when to come back.
Yeah, thank you, Sophia. I just would like to add another last thing. All the relationship with the community and research is about trust, and trust is not only into the people, it's trust into the infrastructure that you have. People need to know that your infrastructure will be there in 5 year, 10 year, 15 year, 20 year. And it's very difficult to get the funding to keep that kind of organization. So here in Canada, mainly in Quebec, we are able to receive money from Quebec government. It's very difficult to find the money in the Canadian government. So each time we have to work on our funding, we need to have a political intervention directly to build on-field program that we need to have to finance that kind of initiative. And all the governmental employees want to help us, but into their actual program, they are not able to help us. So each time we need political intervention to say, okay, it's really important, it's true, okay, so let's work on something to figure it out, that situation. So it's important to keep that in mind if we want to have stability and keep the team on field. If you have to change the employee every year because you don't have enough funding or any long-term perspective, the link between the community and the research will break every 2 years, 3 years. So maybe one day I'll send you a request to letter of support when my next round of funding with the political.
Thank you very much. So now I will free you for the health break. Stretch your legs, take a coffee, a little pastry, and we will reconvene at 11:40, and then we will go into breakout groups. So let's keep in mind all the inspiration we had, the panelists, the marine lab structure we saw, the message from Paul, the inspiration of the floating mangroves, and all this in mind. We will guide you through the breakout groups, and just enjoy the break now. Thank you very much for your active participation, everyone. Okay, everyone, it is now time to come back to the breakout groups. Please take your seat. You can again bring your coffee, your little pastry. But please come and sit so that we can start with our exciting breakout groups. Please, everyone, take your seat. Bring your coffee, your pastry, your juice. Oh, it went very quiet very quickly now. I hope the online participants also had a nice health break at home or in the office. Okay, so I will slowly start explaining what we plan to do and why breakout groups. So the foci and the overarching workshop question is, what could the Atlantic Alliance most usefully do to promote cooperation on coastal resilience issues around the Atlantic Ocean in the short and the medium terms? So we want you to sit all together, and we have separated you so that we can cover multiple experiences, perspective, regions, expertise. So please feel free to discuss openly about everything. We have given you on your table some guiding questions or more conversation starter for the breakout groups. Each of the group will be moderated by either a keynote speaker or a panelist. So they are not going to moderate, they are just going to lead the dialogue and help you and facilitate the dialogues between all of you. All tables have an early career ocean professional that is going, or one or two that are going to also help you take the notes using a Miro board or a whiteboard. that they can go and type their notes. This is how the online whiteboard looks like. So you see these little icons, they each represent your actual physical table there with the number that is present on your table. And your nicely friendly e-cup will come and will write the notes using sticky notes, and they will put them next to your table. Don't be afraid to be messy and to add. The importance is here to add what we think, our worries, our ideas, what is needed, how can science be brought to the community, how the connections can be made. I want to thank all the keynotes, the panelists that are willing to help, also the e-cups that are willing to help, the online moderators also, because we have the same breakout groups online, the hybrid version. Jonathan will be there to support also online, but Godwell and Ida are also there to facilitate the conversation online. After the breakout groups, we are going to come back together, and the e-cups are going to report on one keynote message that was established between on your table. And that's it. So happy conversation. I will walk around if you have any question about the mirror board. The mirror board, the online whiteboard, sorry, will be also projected on the screens, and you can put sticky notes. And if you have questions, I'm here and I can answer to all of them. Thank you very much. Happy conversation. Okay, guys, so we are going to start presenting the key home messages. And we are going to go from 1 to 10. And this part will be moderated by my colleague, Stefan.
I'm not exactly, I totally forgot. I was so engaged in the conversation here. Okay, so now I have to structure this very quickly. So we'll go through the tables. We don't have too much time. But what we've done now is we have on this screen, we have an online whiteboard, which I see you have been filling up. Now, what we'll do afterwards, new software allows you to do this, is we can cut and paste an image or a screenshot, take it, and turn that into text, right? So that's why how you did this, we'll make sure actually the text isn't overlapping afterwards. So we'll capture all of your ideas afterwards in the workshop report. So feel free to continue to add here. For right now, within this room and within the time we have, what I would suggest is we've invited some, and we've had lots of volunteers. So actually some of the tables, or many of the tables, have 2 ECOPs, so early career ocean professionals, that volunteered to present the take-home messages. So we would suggest maybe 1 take-home message that you present, or maybe 2, but keep it short and as concrete as possible. And again, the workshop is being recorded, so we'll also take that and we'll turn that into part of the workshop report as well. So we're trying to capture all of your ideas and all the different formats we're getting them, and then we'll put it all together. But for now, you know, I think articulating it is important. So I'll start with table 1. Table 1, where's table 1? No, there's no table 2. Okay, no table 1. Okay, it's you, okay. Table 2, who would, yes, sorry. I'll let you do all the thank yous afterwards. Where is table 2? There's table 2. Here, Janice. Janice is our early career. No.
Yeah. So we had a very good interactions, and the key take-home messages are cooperation, so which is involving act on whatever we decide on the most relevant programs, and next one is building on existing networks. So those are the 2 key messages.
Table 3.
Okay. So our take-home message is it is important to involve stakeholders in the project or activity since the beginning and letting them be part of the process.
All right. I'm just going to go through the tables, and we can then spend a little bit of time of discussing this as well, right?
Well, I think we don't just have one, but I think we will go with the one that was most present, which was like kind of a need for a new type of profession to translate knowledge into transformative action. So it's more like a transdisciplinary education approach.
There was also the addition of acknowledging that through the whole of the Atlantic community that resources are constrained, and in light of that, we might have to force ourselves to do less to have greater impact. So not just focusing on getting papers out there, but on particular missions to create the impetus for decision makers to actually have impactful change and transformative change.
Okay, so what I'm hearing so far is we're sort of seem to be agreed there are certain principles that should guide activities, but we should also put those into practice in some of the projects we're doing by offering concrete services or formats that allow for engagement, and maybe even piloting some education, training activities that develop on that and build capacities, I guess, in people. So I'm hearing sort of trends about sort of principles, maybe processes, and then structures. We also have, I forgot to mention before, we also have one online group. I'll go through the tables that are here, and then we'll finish up with the online group reporting. So table 5. Is that you?
So here, first we discussed, of course, the importance of taking the needs of the community in consideration. It has to come from them. About data, we have, of course, to translate it from them so it can make sense. And something interesting that we discussed a lot here was about how we should avoid assumptions and expectations, and that you should talk about our failings because you're not learning from them. You just tend to repeat and repeat. So.
Did you have any ideas on how the failings could be presented?
I'm not an ECOP, but thank you. I think there's kind of common understanding that this communicative networks would be a good way of just share openly what we are doing and what the outcome is. Data sharing, experience sharing, resource sharing, and failure sharing.
Because the reason I ask is we're working through these ideas with this hub. This hub is kind of an experiment. It's off-the-shelf software, but it allows us to very inexpensively experiment with ideas and formats and processes, and that's why I was asking also about the failings, like how would you go about that? But super, thank you very much. So we'll come back to that with the hub afterwards, but for now, table 6.
So we, as a TACOM, we focused on the involvement of developing countries and their communities, and we saw 2 avenues for that. The first was to move the venues of international conferences directly to the global south, to the developing countries, so it's easier for them to access, and also provide some kind of training or opportunities for answering a research call and research funding. And the second part was to make use of NGOs and local leaders to spread in both ways between AOIA and the communities, spread the knowledge and the needs of communities, so it can go both goes back up and down between the chain of AOIA and the communities.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Table 7.
Very similar to what's all been said. We kind of had one overarching message throughout. So what I put down for a takeaway was that we need to completely rethink our science society communication strategies, from data access and usability to co-design our knowledge exploitation, that we need to make sure our work is a high-value service provided to communities and not vice versa. For this, we need both technological and societal developments. So for in-person meetings, which are incredibly valuable, we need early, sustained, but easy, a long-term communication with stakeholders and between stakeholders themselves, so it can be a self-sustaining system, and that we need better understanding and appreciation for the cultural context
providing empowering, interactive, and representative in-person meetings to start and build trust before moving to online when you already have a established relationship. And with technology as well, so a better development of the tools available, so from social media to digital twin ocean, or to AI and machine learning, to put science into the pockets of people and to make the engagement as easy as possible and as unavoidable as possible, as you said.
I see, revolutionary ideas from our... by the way, Gary is the OG ECOP, right? He was part of the first group. So, no, but yeah, so I guess there's what we're going through is and I think this reflected in the discussion, at least for me as an observer, is we're going through a phase probably now in the marine science community where we still want to discover the oceans, we want to describe the oceans, we want to describe them, observe them more systematically, we want to give advice. But now comes the really tricky part, being part of solutions, because that's actually a whole new career path, isn't it? And for many of us as individual scientists or lab workers or whatever, we don't necessarily have the capacities to operationalize some of these ideas, to really do that over the longer term. So I'm really curious about what it is that we, maybe in the Alliance or elsewhere, can do to offer, and this was the training suggestion that was here too, that to develop this kind of new skill set. Anyway, thank you. Okay, so table 8.
Okay, thank you so much. We discussed a number of points, key among them recognizing local leadership, co-production, community engagement, capacity building, and also seed funding for the local communities. And then we agreed that the take-home message would be to develop an active citizens project that is coupled with seed funding for the local communities. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So table 8, 9 is here. That's it.
Hey.
Okay.
So at our table, the discussions are revolving around the lack of communication between different agencies and disconnectedness, and the whole data accessibility issue, especially some sensitive information, and sovereignty data protection as an obstacle for institutions, research institutions, to conduct the research. So we're discussing the possibility of promoting synergies between the ocean projects and the necessity, as well as another obstacles as a data treatment process in different research institutions and data manipulation. Yeah.
Okay, but that's very interesting, because that's also a different take on the message we've had here about democratizing science and about being inclusive and transparent. Is that sort of the direction you were thinking? Yeah? Okay, interesting, very good. Good. Okay, table 10.
Thank you. Yeah, so we had quite a few points. I'll try to limit it to 2. Basically, we thought about the creation of something like an All-Atlantic Academy, which is supposed to be a dialogue opportunity for all stakeholders in order to increase trust between scientists and local communities. And also, in that context, to make the knowledge we generate, and we really generate a lot of knowledge, available to everyone, either through translation, as language barriers, especially across all countries of the Atlantic, is still a thing, and also through publishing in different avenues, as we tend to publish in scientific journals, and that knowledge, yes, it's available, but is it really available to everyone? So the big key word here is accessibility of our knowledge, I reckon, yeah.
Okay, super. Another very concrete proposal, very good, very good. Yeah, and this was one thing, because the speed of publications, the number of publications, but the number of also just real world things happening out there in coastal areas. I mean, we've heard it in the news day in, day out in the last week, and that's one of the reasons I mentioned before with this hub, we're trying to be a bit experimental and trying different
mode. So one thing we have there are these feeds that Jonathan mentioned before. We have a news feed in 5 languages. We have to work on the selection process because it seems to be, I mean, good for the United States, but a lot of it is from the US East Coast. But it is, in theory, in 5 languages, and we have a science publications feed from, I think it's 200 plus journals. So the idea is that we don't have to personally curate that with a lot of work, but it's a kind of a go-to place where you can get an overview and you can kind of skim through, and maybe that's something that people can then use on their phones because of course that's where we get a lot of our news now. So, but I mentioned Jonathan, and now I'd like to go to the online. I'll look into the camera to the online group.
Me? Do you hear me?
Perfectly.
Yes, thank you. So I'm Ida, I'm from Norway. I'll present for you today the discussion we had. So many points were touched upon already. We agreed on 2 sentences. So one was to create an informal space for discussion between actors, academia, authorities, and communities at all levels across the Atlantic. And we think that we could get some inspiration from, for example, HELCOM and the OSPAR on how to organize this and do it topic-wise. So we have some post-its on that. And the second one is long-term funding systems to sustain cooperation and exchange related to these short projects that they work very well in communities and then they end. So we need to find a way to extend those projects meaningfully. So that's it. We had a lot of post-its, a lot of discussion, but we can pick up on that later on.
Yes, this idea of research funding cycles was, I think, came up at a number of tables. So those were the reports. I feel like I'm in Eurovision or something. Those were the reports from the different tables. So how should we proceed?
Now it's time to discuss the points and the key messages. So we have about 20 minutes that we can discuss your ideas, the key messages you have taken. I don't know if we can really read them from now. What we could do is we could pick one and then just discuss one, or how you guys were supposed to take a little bit more time explaining your take-home messages.
Are there any reactions to you, to what you've heard? More suggestions of what one can do in concrete terms, could potentially do in concrete terms, what this might look like in practice? I mean, we certainly, we had at our table, we had some examples of how to engage communities, what you need to do, and that's why we had the suggestion from Blessing in his summary that that was actually modeled on an initiative of the British Council. We heard of how funding was done to engage actively citizens for science. Any suggestions? Ideas? Carrie?
Yeah, okay. I don't know if this is a suggestion for that exactly, but it's a quote that came up during our discussion at the table that I found was quite interesting and actionable, and in terms of what the Alliance could do. But in 5 to 10 years, an area with effective stakeholder engagement would have a very different audience form, involving more regional and local actors and decision makers. So that's just something we can put out there to think about into the future, how we as a community look in terms of our composition and diversity and the range of actors at play. It's just a quote that I thought was interesting.
Sorry? Oh, use the table mic, okay. I'll give you the mic afterwards.
Sorry. Okay. Yes. So not necessarily answering your question, but kind of like Gary, just adding to the conversation. Definitely recognizing an overarching theme where persons are talking about the termination of activities when a project timeline ends. So perhaps we need to have some capacity building or conversation towards, or even brainstorming of ideas. I see the need for self-financing mechanisms to sustain change post-project.
I can certainly make more comment on that one, but I'll go back to the one I was going to say about. I think just trying to pick up on the point again around what the Alliance can do in terms of providing that better engagement, and around, we had quite a bit of discussion around how the Alliance can create that network. I love the idea that came from table 10 a moment ago. I can't remember exactly what you called it, about providing these forums, these capability for people to rapidly interact. I think what the Alliance really needs to provide within that five-year aspiration is the networks that we can immediately tap into, so that we can engage all the available stakeholders at the earliest point of concept, right before, as we're writing the proposals, as we're pulling them into the funding opportunity. Because of course what often happens is we create these opportunities for funding, or some people do. We then apply for the proposal. We then go and reach out to some stakeholders, by which point we've already sort of gone quite far down the road. So what I'd really like to see the Alliance doing is providing that network, providing that community. And again, just to add a little bit more to that, I think I just wanted to bring back the point that was made on our table around the NGOs and the role that they have to play in that space, because I think maybe at the moment that might be missing.
We'll go for one more here, and then Ida online.
Thank you. My question is just about the feeds. You'd mentioned the science feed on the new website, the new platform, and I'm just wondering, are there other types of feeds, grant opportunities feeds, social feeds, these sort of like resources on a platform that already exists, that has lots of users? I've seen it in practice in smaller models, and I'm just wondering if this is an opportunity as you're developing the site now.
Yes. Definitely, and it's that kind of suggestion. That's why I said, you know, I obviously can't take notes as I'm standing here, but definitely on board. And you know, and if you have concrete like if you yourself have been involved and you know of things that could be taken on board, please let us know. Like, we're in an exploratory phase. Again, as Sophie said, the OKEANO project, it's funded by the EU. It's a support project. We're there for the Alliance, and we're trying to help the Alliance, which doesn't have a permanent secretary. It's a voluntary, I think formally it's called an administrative agreement, but you know, it's a voluntary arrangement between countries all around the Atlantic. And the question for us is, you know, what do you do that could be exciting and interesting, but drawing on what exists, what is doable, what is manageable of the longer term, because out of that grows hopefully sustainability. So what we're looking for are ideas like an academy, because those kind of ideas are interesting. I think that's what it was called, but we're looking for formats that make it doable and manageable and sustainable over the longer term. So these feeds are you know, we've just sort of discovered them as a kind of an interesting tool for bringing together very disparate information, especially nowadays that we have so much news about coastal resilience, but it's packaged in hurricane news or flood news or drought news or other kinds of news, but it's not aggregated. And what I do like are some suggestions, and we'll look into this, is how do we bring on board other types of knowledge, community knowledge, local knowledge, indigenous knowledge from indigenous communities, or how do we, I just had a second thought, I'll have to come back to it in a second. But anyway, Ida, I made you wait a long time now, sorry.
No worries. It's actually tied into what you were just saying, and we were suggesting that the area, maybe OKEANO, could take lead on some best practices on how to engage communities in coastal resilience issues with an analog to, for example, the Society of Ecological Restoration, who gives out these standards of practice for ecological restorations. So maybe you could provide that in not so long, drawing on the experience of all the projects sitting here and all across the Atlantic. So we could also have good examples, maybe less good examples, and learning points. So these could be published and available.
Okay, thank you very much. Any? Yep.
Yeah, just on something that actually we discussed at the table here, then we didn't discuss further simply because we thought that maybe it's for another audience, like observation and modeling working group. But I think it's still relevant for this one, which is one of the role of the Alliance is to keep maybe the available infrastructures that we have today also present in the next 5 years and in the next 10 years. I mean, there are cases like the Pirata was mentioned, but also the Argo program, but also the use of ship. So those are infrastructure that actually we need to provide research at the quality that the society can accept, so reducing the uncertainties. And this infrastructure actually, they have the risk not to be sustained in the future, at least not at the same level. And I think a clear role for the Alliance is actually to raise the voice and make sure that actually we have enough funding to develop this infrastructure and at least keep it.
Okay, okay. Any other? Oh, here we have another OG.
Thank you. I appreciate the gentleman's comment. Can I ask how many people in this room control the funds to support the All-Atlantic within your reach? How many people write checks or deliver the funds in order to execute the ambition of the All-Atlantic? Unless I am overlooking someone, there are no hands here. Now, those people will be here tomorrow, right? The chairs and the leadership, et cetera. But I would invite you to take up your role in making sure that they understand, not just at the All-Atlantic meeting, but when you go home and when you're working within your domain, that you continue to reinforce the opportunity and the need for allocating the funding to the types of objectives that you see that need to be done and that you're outlining. And I think that list could be very long, but please don't let the All-Atlantic be your focus just when we're at these meetings. You need to continue to advocate these wonderful leveraging opportunities for any one community or country to be working with others in order to get so much more done than anyone could do alone. Thank you.
So yes, thank you, Craig. So Craig is one of the founding initiators of the Atlantic Alliance, and I think your point now, I'll take that as inspiration to ask the room in the last sort of 5 or 10 minutes for the individual giving the presentation on behalf of this workshop tomorrow or the day after, the 5 minutes to tell, because tomorrow and the day after, there will be funding bodies in the room, individuals that will be signing checks in the future and thinking about what it is that they should be investing in on behalf of their taxpayers. What is the one message, sort of, really out of the room and all of the discussions we've had, do you have specific messages you think are very important to bring across? And if it's a message of transparency, perhaps you can add, what does that look like in practice? Or, if it's a matter of principle, I understand that stuff, but how do we operationalize that? Do you have anybody want to add one?
That was a very tall order you just put out there, and I'm not going to achieve it, but I did want to say that a comment that you made, which is if we can move the group more towards a solution space than a problem space, because that will aid in communication and engagement, all that stuff that we've been emphasizing is so important. But, we keep telling people your harbors are a mess, your fish stocks are depleted, and this is all true. But at the same time, if we can point to solutions and ways to get back to where we want things to be, I think that would be really helpful.
Solutions, that's one. And it's a really good one. I'm just going to say 2 words just so there's no empty silence here. But no, because it's really, this has a huge impact, because right now the news is full of these bad stories, I'll call them, in using someone else's language. And many people are having trouble digesting it. Now, I talk to colleagues who are scientists who say, I just don't watch the news anymore. I've had 2 conversations in the last week about this, because for us, working in a city like Brussels and talking with policymakers and elected individuals and civil servants and industry representatives or whatever, it is important to know what's going on in the news, and yet so many even well-educated individuals are saying there's too much bad news. So I think that is, and when we look at the ocean, to be honest, it's still a mixed story, and it is a story that we can change. And if you look at, for example, coming out of the University of California at Santa Barbara, there's the Ocean Health Index. It's not all red. It is very much a mixed story, and your initiative from a few years back, but I've seen it's been revived in different order now. But the ocean sense, there is life out there. There is a lot of life out there, and it is diverse, so it is not all dead, and it's changing. We've heard that story about the coral reefs too, the bleaching, but there are also resistant organisms, and so maybe we should emphasize those more. So solutions is definitely okay. Message taken. Anybody else? Did I see a hand, or was that not sure? I can bring the mic. Okay.
I was just thinking about what you just said. I think it's important to have like a storyline when you communicate these subjects. You need to start by stating the facts and the ugly truth. The thing, it's the difference between negative education and positive environmental education. So you need to state the problem and direct to the solution after. I feel like so you shouldn't. What I mean to say is, we need to do both. Just combine them. State the problem and just do not stay there. You know, because that's the problem. People just state the problem, then they stop the communication. So what I think is you should start with that, and that is very important to make people aware of what the real situation is, because a lot of people do not know. If you talk to a random, like I had a random conversation with the guy in the airplane the other day, people have zero information about what's going on, and it's also important because if you don't think it's a problem, then why would you act towards it? But then after we make people realize that there is the issue, then that's when you need to focus on the solutions, on the hopeful situations, on ocean storytelling, and provide the light at the end of the tunnel that we a lot of times forget to talk about, and prevents social and environmental anxiety.
Thanks. So my name is Harald Hasler-Schittal. I work at the International Council for the Exploration of the Sea. And if I speculate, we had John Bell here talking about the EU Ocean Mission for Ocean and Waters. Could there be an AORIA mission focusing on the solutions that we need to develop, sponsored by institutions from all the states that are involved? I think that would be a big achievement that could be proposed.
You can use your table mic. Yeah.
Thanks. To pick up on that and then bring it back to the funding challenge that we were provided, is the vast majority of countries separate their marine research and science funding. I think typically we have things that sit in the statutory, the things we legislate for, and the things that we might put in the more of the science side of it. And a lot of the blockers I see actually start at that national level, because there's a lot of really good people working on both sides of those fences, but actually at the senior level that we just had the challenge come from, people aren't talking to each other. We don't see coordinated funding opportunities even at the national level. And what this room are all asking for, I'm sure on your tables, because we certainly were, and I heard a lot of voices today, is actually an all-Atlantic coordinated funding opportunity of some sort. So I'll throw the challenge back. The people who write the checks, go talk to each other, come up with a coordinated funding opportunity for your own nation, and then consider how you can work with your international partners to fund some of the great things I've been hearing today.
I think that topic has a long history in the Atlantic Alliance, but maybe this generation will finally be successful. Any other suggestions? I mean, one thing that stood out for me in terms of solutions were the examples I've heard today. So we had some speakers, we had keynote speakers that focused on the bigger picture, with some concrete examples, for example, from Canada, but then we had 3 speakers who are living this interaction on a day-to-day basis. And then here at our table, there was a very good example, and I'd like to come back to that from Ghana, about engaging local communities. And so that, to me, sounds like a building block of, like a solutions building block for this particular community. Is there Anybody that wants to reflect on this kind of community-oriented? Because I think if we have a project, if we have this kind of, if we have a project, if we had a coordinated approach to having an Atlantic Alliance mission, for example, let's call it that, and we got funding, and that funding did ensure that there was a part of it for supporting local community engagement, and then sort of the alliance itself can offer a service, for example, as OKEANO is trying to do now with, for example, this hub, that we offer a service for making that sort of information and the community, you know, accessible to each other. So it's a community building exercise, but also one that is an exercise in trying to make the interaction sustainable, the activity sustainable over longer term. Is that something that could work, or would you like to? Are there other approaches that might work? No? Maybe? We'll go for one or two more comments, and then we wrap up, and we have lunch, which will be served on the side here, together with our friends from Miopar. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Thomas, and I'm from Ghana. Yes, so my contribution I have is that currently the government of Ghana, his intense commitment with other stakeholders like the Ports and Harbours Authority, the Fisheries Department, and then other major bodies within the country came together to develop a project, which is the renovation of the harbour within one of the coastal communities along the shores of Ghana, which is basically popularly known as Jamestown Fishing Harbour. So by way of this project, I, as an ECOP and a very young student or graduate who is interested in the maritime blue economy, I engaged myself in a research on the empowering coastal communities in Ghana on how to harness sustainable ocean technologies. And I realized that, yes, it is true. Information from the people or the fisher folks from the coastal community, and then what we get from those between the government and then the people is quite different. So we as researchers going down to the people, trying to understand what they do, the challenges they face and what they go through, as most of them depends on the sea as their livelihood with years of experience. I think collaboration or international partnerships and technology sharing is the key, because as it stands now, Ghana, for instance, is ready, and the government is also putting in efforts to make sure the blue economy space is very good and sustainable. And then the fisher folks, the community too, they're also ready, but then there's nothing to actually use to work on. They don't have the facilities, but the human beings, the people are ready to do something, and they are looking forward to do something. So building up this structure as a harbor where fishing or fishes that is being caught is being well managed and then gets back to the community, they were very happy. But like a center where research is being done to monitor or track the fisheries or the activities within the coastal areas is limited. And I think the aspect of collaboration where technology and then transfer of information is being harnessed is going to be something that it will help. And then the way we are going to track these coastal communities, I'm not sure it's only Ghana that is also working out. But then I'm sure since the Atlantic Ocean links most of the countries, about 50 together by way of both transport and a whole lot from what we eat to what we wear. Yes, so I think collaboration and then that of transfer of technology will help. So you have the machines, you have the technology, you have the research vessel, I have the people, you also have something. When we bring this together, I'm sure we can actually limit the ideas on funds, basically, and then also put ourselves in the shoes together and then try to solve the issue together. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Okay, we've one final comment, and then I hand back over to Sophie from Martin. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. I'm still struggling a bit with the realization of the whole co-design thing, because I know many projects where people talk about, yeah, of course we include stakeholders. So we invite them for workshops. And That's not going to work. I mean, we just talked about it earlier. We, scientists, have to go to the local actors. We don't have to invite them to come to us. We have to go there and talk to them. And this is something that is often still missing in the project, and partly, I believe, because of time and because of funding and the whole funding scheme. That brings me back to the message that you asked for to the policymakers and the funding agencies. How about better and more strongly supporting a co-design phase at the beginning of each project? I'm not saying we have to make it compulsory, but even why not? I mean, just ask in each project for a first initial phase where the project coordinators or the project team, scientific project team, goes to the local stakeholders, to the local actors, and talk to them about how to develop the whole project. I think that would be a very innovative way of directing funding on the European level.
Perfect, thank you very much. Thank you for your participation, your comments, and you might have noticed that we lost a few participants. These are the ECOPs that are going to visit schools right now, so it's not because they don't want to keep going with us, it's just that they have another commitment. Just to close up, if I can put back the slides online, we are just going to go over a little bit of our outputs and next steps and closing remarks before we break for the lunch. Yes. Short-term steps. So where are we going from here? First of all, we're going to take everything you have mentioned, every note that you have. If you have some notes that you didn't have time to put on the Miro board, please email me anything. If you think of something on your way back home, just email us. We'll be happy to incorporate it in anything that comes out of this. It is important to have all of your comments and your inputs at this point where we are. We are going to produce a workshop output that we are going to share with you. You're going to have to bear with us. It's not going to be produced within a day, so it will come in the next few weeks, maybe months. We will do a summary of the discussion that we had today at the workshop, and we will going to combine all of the key messages and proposals for the next step. We are going to ask approval for all of the speakers and panelists, and then we are going to make all the slides available, and we are going to do an overview of the resources available for continued collaboration. We are happy to put you in contact with other researchers in case you haven't had the time to really exchange, to build on the community, the Atlantic community. We need your engagement. I always say this at the end of each of the past workshops we have done the past 6 months. It is important that you remain part of the process. It is important that you stay engaged. We have here the survey or the action link that we are using. It is also on the hub. You can scan the QR code. It will take you directly there. We welcome any suggestion, especially from non-English speaking region. I think together, the team, we can gather a lot of effort to mix different languages and try to ask our collaborator to translate and to put us in contact and facilitate these things. Sometimes non-English speaking communities are harder to reach. So that's generally where we are going to go from today. Well, actually, from today, we're going to go to the forum tomorrow. But with the workshop outcomes, this is where we are going to go. I want to thank you, really. Your participation was great. Everyone was really committed. I really appreciate everyone's collaboration here. And I want to thank the OKEANO team, the European Commission, the museum, which were great to help me organize here, my colleague from KDM, Stefan and Jonathan, the girls that just left, Lavinia and Lisa, helping with the communication, Miguel from Science Cruncher, who also helped us with a lot of the production that we did. So thank you very much, and we will now slowly welcome, hopefully, the participants from Mayopar that will come and mingle with you. The lunch is a box lunch. I haven't had the time to label everything, so be careful. It's in French. So végétalien means vegan, and végétarien means vegetarian. I would just go and label it quickly before you all take it. So we have without gluten also, that's why I asked for your dietary preferences. That's it from my side. So enjoy Ottawa and have fun. It's sunny, so let's enjoy it. Thank you very much, everyone. Oh, wait. these are our contacts, our email addresses, but you've received so many emails from me that you definitely have them. There's also the coordination team from OKEANO, which is the people from the Marine Institute, which I forgot to thank. But I thank them really also. They're just gone to the embassy to prepare for tonight. So Laura, Niall, and Veronica, you will see all of them tonight at the reception. Thank you again. Sorry for that. Bye.